A young man, at a certain time of the day, mentioned that he was heading to the library. He took his bicycle outside, ensuring everything was in order. He adjusted his pants for better safety during maneuvers and finally, put on his gloves. He then set off, pedaling towards his destination. Farther ahead, two young men were discussing going to the internet cafe. One of them advised the other to enjoy the activity in moderation to avoid becoming overly attached to the habit. As they continued talking, the young man passed by them on his bicycle, showing off skilled maneuvers. He continued his route, dodging some obstacles that appeared in his path. A couple watched as he, to shorten his route, jumped over the bench where they were seated. He rode with such mastery that it seemed no barrier could stop him. As he slowed down, he could feel the wind and admire a beautiful sunset. There was a slight commotion among some young people who were observing one of their bicycles. They were very curious about its value and where it had been purchased. They also wanted to know if the bicycle was similar to a racing bike, or if it was built for higher speeds. The owner explained that his bicycle was unparalleled compared to others. In the end, the boys were disappointed, as they had wanted more information. Others noted that he had recently entered the world of cycling. The young man, who showed little interest in the conversation, was named TJ Kim and noticed someone practicing downhill. Looking up, he saw that the descent would be done in a single gear. The person performing the maneuver was merely adjusting his hood, preparing to begin. Some people watched from below, while others just passed by normally. From the top, he calculated the trajectory and began his descent. As he performed the maneuver, he remembered his parents' advice. He recalled how they spoke about the importance of studying and achieving good grades. He also thought about how he had few friends, as people avoided him for being from a family of doctors and the best student in school. These and other thoughts crossed his mind during the descent. The movements and maneuvers, which were habitual to him, appeared risky to many observers. At the end of one maneuver, his tires even emitted smoke. People noticed he had performed a skid without braking once. TJ's new bicycle, which had been the center of attention moments before, was quickly forgotten. The two friends watching the maneuver couldn't resist praising his skill. They realized that the person in question was Manhwa, the student council president. However, this information made little impact, as Manhwa didn't care about such details. He thought about greeting him at school the next morning. Another school day was beginning, and everyone around Jay was complaining about something. Jay only focused on his studies, paying no attention to what was happening around him. While reflecting on how unmotivated he felt, Mia was watching him nearby. She was also surprised when her friend asked her what she was thinking about. Her friend wanted to know if Mia had been studying hard for the upcoming exams. Smiling, Mia replied that she was studying a little now and then. Her friend's advice was that Mia should dedicate more time unless she wanted to perform poorly on the tests. She believed Mia should study, but not focus solely on it. Mia thought the student council president was someone who only studied and had no hobbies. However, she always defended him whenever anyone spoke poorly of him. Mia had nothing but praise for him. Jay was an incredible person in her eyes. That's when her friend realized Mia was in love with him. The boy in the black jacket and red hair was admired by all the girls. Minu was also very popular among the girls in that class. When Yuna noticed his presence, she remarked that just his arrival made everyone excited. As soon as Yuna made her comment, Minu insulted her, calling her grandma. Yuna didn't seem to enjoy that joke. Even less so when he stuck out his tongue and made an unnecessary comment. This left her quite irritated. Despite her friend asking her to stay calm, Yuna let out all the adjectives that came to mind. Even being so impulsive, someone observing the scene noticed that Yuna was beautiful even when angry. Dom Kong admired even the smallest movements she made. Minu thought his sister was overly temperamental and preferred to slip away quietly, pretending not to know her. Despite all the commotion, Jay remained focused on his studies. As he was leaving to escape his sister, Minu decided to greet Jay. Jay simply ignored Minu's greeting. Minu quickly realized he was being ignored. Noticing that Minu wouldn't leave easily, Jay told him he was busy and asked him to say what he wanted. Minu didn't miss the chance to invite him to join the team. He managed to get Jay's attention for a few moments. Minu remarked that the downhill Jay had done was amazing. He mentioned how surprised the team was to see him descend the slope with a single skid. Even more surprised were they to discover that he was the president of the student council. He said he had gone there to ask if he wanted to join the group. Once again, he was ignored and received no response from Jay. Minu kept trying to get his attention, without success. His sister found it strange to see the two of them talking because she didn't know they were friends. Mia, on the other hand, also wanted to know what they were talking about. Jay, obviously, wasn't interested and wanted Minu to stop disrupting his studies. Minu couldn't believe that Jay truly had no interest at all. As he turned away, he muttered that it was fine and apologized for the interruption. He grumbled that guys like Jay were irritating. Although he didn't pay much attention to what Minu said, Jay felt a slight interest in the topic. Hearing about bicycles reminded him of when he was 13 years old and got one. His uncle mentioned that he wanted Jay to have that bike as a gift. He said that although studying was important, it was good to get some fresh air sometimes. He also commented that if Jay got better, they could go on bike trips together. After classes ended, Everyone was leaving the school, chatting with their classmates. The friends Yuna and Mia were talking about how stressful it was to be a teenager. Yuna always believed that adolescence would be more romantic and memorable, but it felt the same every day. Mia thought Yuna shouldn't be so negative because there were still many adventures ahead. Young Yuna wished all that fun would come soon, as she was tired of school. Mia suggested thinking positively since they would get through it all during the holidays. Dom Kong suddenly appeared, asking if Yuna wanted to watch a zombie movie with him. She screamed, startled, and asked him not to be so loud, deciding to punish him a little. She had already warned him not to show up like that, as it was something a stalker would do. After the punishment, he noticed she knew how to punch very well. As soon as he recovered, he chased after her to watch the movie on a 90-inch LED TV. Jay was watching his classmates leave through the window while packing his school supplies. After preparing his backpack, ready to leave, he noticed Minu was behind him again. Minu said he made a point to return while Jay wasn't studying. He quickly said he just wanted a chance for Jay to decide if he really didn't want to join the team. He mentioned there would be a race that night, and that a competitor was interested in challenging Jay. Jay, however, simply looked him in the eyes and said he hadn't even started riding yet. He asked Minu to stop bothering him and go play with his friends. Even so, he mentioned a guy in their group named TJkin. That guy badmouthed Jay's bike, claiming it was just junk and nothing special. He continued talking, observing if his words were having any effect. He also commented that he hated seeing someone place so much importance on a bike's features. He added that he'd seen Jay riding around on that bike for a long time and wanted to challenge him to a race. The meeting place would be Green Park that same night, and Jay didn't share any more details. Although he didn't respond directly, Jay's discomfort about the comments on his bike was visible. At night, in the mentioned park, there was a lot of noise as it was a leisure spot. Many cyclists were there, performing tricks and seeking relaxation. Several showed that a bike could be used for more than just simple races. The tricks of the Zephyrus team drew attention, and many stopped to watch them. Minu was calm and focused when his friend decided to play a joke. He pressed the can of energy drink he was drinking against Minu's face. Minu was greatly startled because the can was cold. Satisfied, the friend asked Minu to calm down and offered him the drink. After accepting the drink offered by June, Minu was sure he would really show up. Minu replied there wasn't much to do but wait. The friend suggested that if Jay didn't show up, they could practice some races. Then he asked why Minu was so obsessed with Jay. The friend replied he wasn't obsessed and asked him to speak more quietly, so no one got the wrong idea. June mentioned there was no need for a reason to ride a bike. After all, seeing how good he was, it was clear he'd been riding for a long time. He thought it would be more fun to ride with them than to keep going solo. The two were calm when a group approached. The group asked Minu where the snob from his school was since he was already very late. It was requested, however, that they wait a little longer. One of those present insinuated that Jay was avoiding the challenge. Minu, confident in Jay, replied that there was no need for such arrogance because he would show up soon. He suggested that while waiting, they could do a warm-up round. They underestimated Minu since his leg was injured. In the heat of the moment, Jay finally showed up, and everyone began referencing some of his accomplishments. Upon seeing him, Minu remarked it was a shame since he had been eager to race against TJ and his carbon bike. But perhaps there would be another chance next time. TJ then asked if Jay was really the guy who had challenged him. As he approached Jay, he extended his hand for a handshake, saying he thought Jay wouldn't show up. Jay, however, ignored the gesture, as he usually did. TJ wondered if Jay had some sort of issue. When Jay got closer, Minu mentioned he had been worried, thinking Jay wouldn't come. Jay got straight to the point, and told them to get to what mattered since he was busy. He explained that June would outline how everything would work. June, greeting from a distance to avoid being ignored, mentioned he was from Sunny School. He said his name was June Lee, and he was in his 3rd year, surprising Minu, who noticed how formally he introduced himself. Another boy, Jack Joe, informed them he was in his 2nd year. Jack then explained the basics of the bike race. The rules were simple, being a one-on-one competition. The winner would be the one who returned first to the starting point, adding that Jay probably already knew the route. Even so, they would place people at every turn to ensure safety and keep everyone on track. Minu explained that his opponent was the arrogant guy nearby. Jay coldly responded not to bother him with joining the team after the race. June handed him a helmet and emphasized the importance of staying safe. While inspecting the bike, Minu noticed that Jay had removed the brakes, possibly to make it lighter. With everyone ready, TJ, trying to provoke him, challenged Jay to keep up with that junk. Minu told TJ to stop boasting and focus on the race. Irritated, TJ asked why Minu always enjoyed showing off. It was announced to the group that the race would be filmed. The setup was simple. Once the gear was released, they would start pedaling. Holding the gear with his fingers, the announcer told everyone to focus, then released it, and it dropped slowly to the ground. As soon as the gear hit the ground, everyone set off, starting the race. TJ quickly took the lead, thanks to his lighter bike. June knew the real race would begin once they started pedaling harder and accelerating. He needed to hurry to capture everything on camera. TJ kept mocking his opponent's team, calling Jay's bike a piece of trash. Looking back briefly, he told Jay to get used to the view or overtake him. It seemed TJ's words served as motivation for Jay to push his bike even harder. Looking back again, TJ realized Jay was gaining quickly, and this wouldn't be as easy as he thought. Jay was closing the gap rapidly, forcing him to significantly increase his speed. Luckily, they were approaching a marked curve. TJ's smile revealed his plan. He would toss a few cones to make things harder for his rival. For Jay, the cones meant little since he was used to navigating obstacles daily. June noticed TJ's dirty trick and questioned his motives. Indeed, the cone caused some imbalance. While filming and observing the situation, June shouted for Jay to be careful of what lay ahead. A car was approaching their path, and a collision seemed imminent. But Jay thought fast. The car served as a ramp, giving him extra momentum. He performed an interesting maneuver in the process. This infuriated TJ, as that was not part of his plan. June, filming the entire scene, was left both amazed and convinced the footage would turn out incredible. After recovering from that small incident, Jay kept pedaling and gaining speed. After the scare, June felt relieved not to have witnessed the disaster. He also shouted at TJ to stop with his reckless behavior. At one point, TJ sarcastically apologized, claiming his foot might have slipped. However, Jay was bolder than TJ had anticipated. The other cyclist, while filming, kept an eye on TJ's movements, wary of what he might try. On the other hand, he admired Jay's skills, thinking the 360 maneuver and his reaction time were phenomenal. He wished his classmates had witnessed it live. The race continued, with Jay closing in fast on TJ. In moments, they were side by side, and Jay just wanted to end this ridiculous race. TJ assumed Jay was only talking to throw him off. Up ahead, a sharp curve signaled another challenge, and TJ was already hatching plans. He thought he might pull something off in that tight turn, as he had noticed something critical. Instead of slowing down, he seemed to speed up even more. Jay, however, had a different perspective on cycling. He took the turn with spectacular proficiency. Now, the one who had not only a rear view but also a full view of the spectacle and maneuvers was TJ. He even had the chance to witness a perfectly executed drift right in front of him. As soon as they passed the curve, TJ had a noticeable lead ahead. His face showed the impatience he was feeling. Unlike Jay, who was simply enjoying the race with ease, embracing the moment and the circumstances, June was more excited about Jay, never imagining he would use a drift to take a curve. Well, he had no idea where Jay could have learned to ride so well. But Jay rode that old bike as if it were an extension of his own body. For TJ, who was behind and resentful at not being able to close the distance, it seemed unthinkable that his carbon bike was losing to that piece of junk. While TJ was still fuming, he looked ahead and noticed Jay waving toward his rear. Looking back, Jay said that now TJ would have that view. This drove TJ crazy, and he began pedaling in an insane burst of effort. Furious, he said Jay could wait, as it wasn't over yet. TJ told him he would catch up, and that it was just a matter of time. Looking back, he stated that studying wouldn't be necessary. His goal was to finish everything in 4 minutes. He knew TJ didn't want him to think that, just because he was ahead, the race was already won. He truly despised everyone at school, considering them a group of fools. The gap between them began to increase rapidly. June hoped nothing serious would happen, wishing for everything to end well. Jay pedaled effortlessly, while TJ strained himself to the limit to catch up. Annoyed, TJ said he wouldn't allow Jay to surpass him so easily. He declared that he would catch him on the last hill. However, this wasn't a challenge for Jay, who had already executed several maneuvers. June, who was behind recording the moment, shouted for both to slow down because the descent was too steep. Additionally, there was a fence at the bottom of the hill. He feared someone might get seriously injured if they couldn't maneuver properly. Nevertheless, slowing down didn't seem to be the intention of either of them. Despite June's constant shouting, Jay, being highly skilled, managed to descend without even touching the fence ahead. After significantly reducing his speed, he merely touched the fence to push himself forward and continued. He kept pedaling as if nothing had happened. However, the one coming behind was having trouble. It was TJ. Having gained too much speed on a steep hill with the fence at the bottom, he was now in trouble. No matter how much he braked, he couldn't stop in time to avoid colliding with the fence ahead. Unfortunately, he couldn't avoid the impact and crashed his body against the fence as his bike fell. June, who was cautiously coming behind, noticed when TJ had the minor accident. Jay, looking back, saw what had happened and immediately went to help him. After ensuring TJ couldn't ride anymore, Jay slowed down his bike. With that characteristic look, Jay called TJ a loser, and he continued pedaling at a leisurely pace. Meanwhile, TJ was getting up from the ground, and June ran to check if he was okay. Still on the ground, his injuries didn't hurt more than his pride. At the finish line, the people there were busying themselves with some activity to pass the time. Minu was entertaining himself with a bike and obstacle game. When he heard someone say they were returning, He thought the race had been quick and got excited, as he had also broken his own record in the game. They commented that the cyclist from Sunny had arrived first, which meant TJ had lost. His colleagues were surprised, not believing he had lost, and were worried because he hadn't shown up yet. Minu thought that all the talk about TJ had been for nothing. He had finally gotten what he deserved. However, he remembered always saying it wasn't about the bike but the cyclist that mattered. He knew he would need to watch the video when June returned. Day looked at Minu and asked him to remember what he had said before the race. He took off his helmet and tossed it to him. Putting his hood back on, he told him not to bother him at school anymore with those race stories. He passed by the others as he headed back home. Everyone thought he was very tough. Minu was eager for his friend to arrive soon because he wanted to know all the details of what had happened. As soon as he heard, he was surprised and asked what had occurred. He saw that Jay was carrying TJ and asking for a first aid kit. They asked what had happened and suggested TJ be taken to the hospital. TJ, gritting his teeth in pain, couldn't believe he had to endure such humiliation. Even injured, he still displayed arrogance and demanded that the person responsible for what had happened be brought to him. Back home after the race, Jay noticed the house was empty since his mother was on duty. His brother Keijo asked where he had been messing around, suspecting he was riding his bike again. Jay didn't respond and simply bent down to take off his shoes, while his brother kept talking about university and entrance exams, insisting that he couldn't spend time biking with friends. Everything changed when he heard the TV, which was starting to play Kitty Hour. He jumped with excitement as the long-awaited cartoon had finally begun, not noticing that he had stubbed his toe on a corner. He rolled back and forth in pain, but it slowly subsided as the anime began. Gradually, his sad expression turned to one of fascination with what he was watching. Despite appearing mature, Jay was thoroughly delighted whenever a cat-themed anime aired on TV. His brother took advantage of Jay's distraction to head off for a shower, aiming to wash off the sweat from the race. While showering, he reflected on moments from the competition. Flashes of the race replayed in his mind. A strange feeling took over him. He had never reacted like this before. The next day, he was ready for school again and inspecting his bike's tires. He noticed they were ruined due to the previous day's race. This wasn't good, and as he pondered over it, his brother came outside and observed him. Keijo asked what was wrong with the bike and wanted to know if Jay was really planning to ride it to school. Seeing his brother preparing to bike to school, Keijo thought he was obsessed with bikes. However, Jay paid no attention to his brother's remark that riding a bike in the morning was a waste of energy. A student shouldn't exhaust themselves so early. Jay, already set to bike to school, simply said goodbye. Keijo didn't understand what was wrong with his brother or what he would become if he kept acting this way. He was standing there, all serious, when a spotted cat suddenly appeared in front of him, freezing in fear. Keijo had chased that cat on other occasions and, in that moment, felt the urge to chase it again. Meanwhile, Mia was rushing because she had almost missed the bus, which was crowded that day. While she was crammed into the overheated bus with many others and surrounded by terrible traffic, Jay was simply cycling, enjoying the fresh breeze on his face. Inside the bus, people complained about the chaotic morning traffic. Mia looked around, feeling disconnected from the conversations of the boys nearby. Suddenly, her eyes caught sight of something that made her blush. It was her beloved riding by on his bike. Seeing him cycling to school, she momentarily forgot how unpleasant being on the bus was. Soon, the boys noticed that a bike could actually be faster than the bus. They realized they might need a faster and more comfortable bicycle. Meanwhile, inside a luxurious car also stuck in traffic, a young man was grumbling. However, the driver could do little, slowly inching forward toward the school. But when the boy saw a cyclist who would undoubtedly reach the school far before him, he told the driver he'd rather bike than stay in the car. As Jay continued on his bike, the school principal, who also owned a bike and loved cycling, approached him. Jay glanced to the side and saw the principal, who commented that it was nice to get a little morning exercise by biking. Jay found it natural that the principal also rode a bike to school. The principal, a well-built man, always commuted to work on his bicycle. Jay realized it was important to be cautious while cycling since riders like them weren't always welcomed. Sidewalks and roads were unsafe for cyclists, and unfortunately, even bike lanes didn't provide complete safety. Smiling, the principal told Jay to set the conversation aside and pick up the pace. Laughing, Jay remarked that the principal and the student council president couldn't afford to be late. At the school entrance, there was a commotion as some students were being stopped. Due to the lack of uniform or extravagant behavior, one student was singled out, a second year. He tried to sneak past but was stopped because his hair was an unusual color. When confronted, he was asked if he had accidentally spilled orange juice on his hair. Additionally, the student wasn't wearing his badge or carrying his backpack. He claimed he had left them at school. However, this wasn't the answer they had been expecting. When Jay and the principal arrived, they saw all the chaos unfolding so early in the morning. The principal wanted to know what was happening, and the staff member explained they were simply enforcing the conduct code. The principal responded that it wasn't the best way to start the day. It seemed like all the students gathered there were the most attractive ones. The principal wanted to ensure the school's image wouldn't be compromised and that students would be more mindful of their attire. All of them, putting on innocent faces, promised the principal they would maintain a good appearance. Shortly after, they ran off like mischievous children. However, the handsome student with orange hair stopped to listen to beautiful girls entering the scene. He thought to himself, since when were there such stunning girls around? Being small and cute, he caught their attention, and they invited him to meet them at lunchtime. The principal observed that the boy still retained his youthful charm. The janitor reminded the principal that he had a lecture scheduled for the morning. In the classroom, there was noise, people chatting, and others trying to sleep. Yuna was showing her phone to Mia, displaying a photo of the principal with an explanatory text, saying it was material for the lecture. He definitely had style, and Yuna noticed Mia staring at someone and asked why she was doing that. Mia was merely observing, as Jay had come to school on a bicycle that day. Yuna teased her, saying someone there was in love. When Yuna looked, someone was calling for her admirer, or perhaps the guy with the band-aid mustache. That time, she playfully threw a book at his forehead and told him not to shout behind her. He realized it was her way of showing she liked him. While all the commotion happened in the classroom, he was in the corner reading a book. Some boys in his class were talking about a video they'd seen online about a bicycle race. Even those who didn't like bicycles were interested in the video. Minu, passing by him, said he'd seen the video June had recorded of the race. The girls with him wanted to know how he knew the student council president. Mia was a very brave girl, always paying attention to what was happening during class. On the other hand, Mia's admirer was asleep. Everyone in the classroom was somewhat bored, except for those who were sleeping and dreaming about getting scolded by Yuna. Occasionally, Mia would glance at her beloved to see if he noticed her. Even if he didn't look back, just imagining he might look made her blush. At one point he did look, but indifferently. Perhaps he didn't even see her, and was just gazing at the clouds. Everyone was leaving when someone from afar noticed Jay preparing to ride again. Unable to resist, they wanted to ride for a second, so they placed a hand on his shoulder and asked. They were completely ignored and had no choice but to watch Jay leave. From a distance, Jade approached and said they couldn't borrow the bike because they would probably break it. He felt calmer when he heard Yuna's voice approaching. Radiating happiness, he asked if she had noticed how radiant and beautiful his skin looked that day. She replied that his face was oily because he'd slept through the entire class. He insisted, repeatedly saying she should stop pretending she didn't like him because he had noticed her watching him while he slept. That's when she playfully kicked the back of his leg and kindly asked him to be quiet. On his way home, Jay was riding his bike when he heard a noise coming from the tires. He stopped to check and realized it had finally gotten a flat. That's when TJ and his friends arrived, asking if he wanted help fixing the piece of junk. Jay, barely recognizing TJ with glasses and a strange face, asked if he remembered him. Dom Kong was walking calmly, as he had won over Yuna's affection to the point his body was sore. Since he'd overslept during class, he needed to hurry to get to work. That's when he saw Jay from afar, the guy he had asked to ride the bike, who hadn't let him. He noticed Jay wasn't alone and that some troublemakers seemed to be bothering him. TJ asked if Jay had slept well because he himself hadn't, and his forehead hurt. Jay, unsure of who was speaking, asked who he was. This made TJ furious, thinking Jay was mocking or ignoring them. Kicking Jay's bike, he accused him of being cocky just because he'd won with that piece of junk. Seeing his bike on the ground, Jay couldn't hold back. TJ said that first Jay had humiliated him in front of everyone with that pile of nothing, and now he was ignoring him. But Jay didn't want to hear it. He punched TJ to stop him from talking nonsense and for kicking his bike. At first, Jay didn't seem to be much of a fighter, as the punch didn't have much effect. However, it was enough to make TJ and his friends furious. They taught Jay a lesson and stomped on his glasses. Then TJ crouched to Jay's level on the ground and asked how he would show up to class the next day. He also asked if Jay remembered him now, but even after everything, Jay still didn't recall. TJ said he might need another lesson to improve his memory. That's when Dom Kong spoke, drawing everyone's attention with his boldness. Upon seeing him, TJ, not knowing who he was, dismissed him as just another loser. Dom Kong remarked that it was funny how bullies always fought 3 against 1. After saying that, he dropped his backpack on the ground. Cracking his knuckles, he said he would join the fight. TJ asked if he was lost. That's when TJ's companions whispered to him, asking if he didn't know who that person was. Wide-eyed, TJ's friends murmured about Dom Kong, warning that he was dangerous. Things seemed to get serious. Whatever they told TJ made him back out of the fight. TJ glared at Jay and said he couldn't stand fools from that school. He added that Jay should thank his friend for that since he considered him lucky. They left before the situation could escalate further. Dom Kong realized that, aside from being impressive, he was also quite intimidating, as their mere sight of him made them vanish. He extended a hand to Jack, but Jack simply ignored it. After getting up, Jack said he was fine and told Dom to forget about him and leave. Confused, Dom touched his hair, wondering why everyone around him acted like they didn't like him. Not far away, Mino was walking, accompanied by 2 girls, and planning to go to karaoke. But ahead, as he passed by, there was TJ, who had previously picked on Mino before leaving. TJ sarcastically remarked how nice it must be to have money since otherwise, Mino wouldn't have 2 girls around him. However, Mino cancelled his plans with the girls when he saw Jay up ahead. He apologized to the girls, promising to reschedule their karaoke outing later. The girls were visibly disappointed. Nearby, Dom Kong was trying to explain to Jake that the bike was wrecked and that he was in bad shape. That's when Mino appeared, asking what had happened to his face. Did he get into a fight? Dom explained that some jerks from another school had been beating on him when he showed up and stopped them. TJ knew what that meant. The guys who were with him earlier were probably trying to get revenge. Jay asked TJ if he was satisfied with the answer and told him to leave him alone. Mino felt guilty and apologized for getting him involved in such a situation. Dom Kong just told him to forget about it and never mention the team again. However, he was concerned about Jay's injuries and wanted him to go to a pharmacy. Jay didn't want to ask for help, but his friend insisted that something was wrong with him. Dom even offered to at least walk him home, but Jay told him to stay out of his life. Frustrated with the standoff, Dom Kong decided to take action. He stepped forward, got close to Jay, and with one hit, knocked him unconscious. Mino asked why he had done that. It wasn't necessary, he said, but Dom explained that it was nothing compared to what Yuno would have done. Still, Mino questioned how he could hit an injured guy like that. Dom clarified that if he hadn't intervened, they'd spend the entire day arguing. He picked Jay up, slung him over his shoulder, and began walking normally, telling Mino to grab the bike. When Mino asked where they were going, Dom replied that he didn't know either. It seemed neither of them knew where Jay lived. The girls nearby thought Dom's behavior was a bit jerkish. Mino went to the pharmacy to buy some medication and bandages for Jay. While waiting, Mino noticed Dom Kong drop something on the ground. Afterward, they both stood there, looking at the unconscious boy, unsure of what to do with him. Either of them knew his address. As they approached a nearby area, they noticed someone looking at their phone, which displayed an image of a white cat. It was K-Joe, Jay's brother, passing by and planning to stop at home for a moment before heading to his class. A conversation among some people caught his attention. He thought they were bullies from Sunny High and noticed someone unconscious near them. Looking closer, he thought he recognized the face. Who was that boy? It was then that he realized it was Jay, his brother. Startled, he called out, catching the attention of the two who were pondering nearby. Dom Kong thought he heard the boy mention Jay's name, and Mino thought the same. K-Joe, terrified, didn't know what to do as the two guys stared at him. He feared he might be their next target. Mino wondered if the boy knew Jay, while Dom Kong suspected they were related. Trying to avoid eye contact, Dom Kong said he didn't know the boy and calmly began walking away. Dom Kong was convinced he wasn't mistaken. He was sure he heard the boy mention Jay's name. Minu was observing closely and realized that the boy was significant, reminding him of someone. Then, the two of them, piecing the puzzle together, realized the boy looked just like Jay, only younger. That's when they noticed the boy was lying and was, in fact, Jay's brother. They couldn't believe that. Even seeing his brother unconscious, he walked calmly as if he didn't know him. Furious, the two wanted to know why he was trying to act so calm while clearly running away. Dom Kong picked up Jay, still unconscious, and Minu grabbed the bicycle. The two were following the boy. After some time, everything was cleared up, and the boy understood they were his brother's friends. He explained that he ran because he thought they would beat him up or something like that when asked if he was abandoning his brother. He said he needed to take care of him. That's when Dom Kong realized how selfish he was. The boy remarked that, by running around and getting into fights, it seemed Jay had chosen his friends well. When they arrived at his house, they placed Jay in his room, and Dom Kong began patching him up with band-aids. After cleaning Jay's forehead, he finished the difficult task, doing everything he could. Now, it was up to the patient. Keijo couldn't believe his brother had such unbearable friends. Minu asked about the band-aid under Dom Kang's nose. and Dom Kong revealed he had his own secret. Minu, quite curious, pulled off the band-aid to see what was underneath. Seeing what was there, Minu commented that if the principal saw that, Dom Kong would be in trouble. Minu asked Jae's brother if there was anyone else in the house. Looking around the room, he noticed it was a typical boy's room. He also saw Jae's brother staring at what seemed to be surveillance, and the boy said he was watching to ensure nothing got stolen. The more the boy talked, the more Minu thought he resembled his annoying brother. They rummaged through the room until they found a picture frame with a photo of Jae's uncle and a bicycle from when Jae was a child. Minu approached to show the frame, but Dom Kong found it strange for him to get so close. Looking at the photo, Dom Kong realized that the child in the image couldn't be that annoying boy. Then, they noticed the boy in the photo seemed kind and realized it was Jae. Minu pointed out that Jae had that bicycle since he was little and asked why he showed up for the race after implying he wouldn't. Dom Kong found it odd that he was whispering. After observing so much, Dom Kong started noticing that the boy before him was gradually transforming into Yuna. He thought he might be hallucinating because the boy looked so much like Yuna. At that moment, embarrassed, he thought he might have been feeling a bit lonely lately. Until then, they hadn't been close enough friends to know the two were twins. Minu thought it was a family photo but couldn't remember who the boy was. Jae, with his face covered in band-aids, woke up and asked what they were doing in his house. The two just exchanged glances and asked if he had finally woken up and if he had slept well. He got up, walked over to them, and grabbed the photo frame from their hands. Angry, he told them to keep their dirty hands off his things and get out of there. Minu quickly grabbed a mirror and showed him that they had only brought him there to take care of him. Dom Kong, proud, said they didn't need to thank him, as he was just doing his duty. In a matter of seconds, Dom Kong removed all the band-aids from Jae's face. Jae told them he wasn't interested in arguing, he was tired, and he wanted them to just leave. Dom Kong placed a hand on Jae's shoulder and asked if he was really going to send them away like that. The two concluded that he wasn't being very kind since they were only there to help him. They decided to open Pandora's box and see what was on the computer. Jae, angry, told them not to mess with the computer, but they ignored him and did it anyway. While Minu took the opportunity to pin Jae down, Dom Kong disdainfully examined everything Jae was studying. Smiling, Dom Kong told Jae he would show him the dark path to an entirely new world. He said Jae should be happy to have met them, but Jae still didn't want them messing with the computer. Keijo thought it would be better to go to class since he was wasting too much time because of those three. Finally, Dom Kong finished setting up the link. He asked if they were ready, and that's when Jae's brother opened the door. Seeing what they were looking at, he realized they were facing the Forbidden World. Everyone gathered around, watching the content Dom Kong had put on the computer. Although blushing like the others, he was angry because those idiots had downloaded junk files. He complained that his computer had become a mess and hesitated for a moment, checking if anyone was approaching. Before he could delete or review the content, his brother returned. This time, it was to relay a message from their mother. A little further away, Minu and Dom Kong were discussing the video. Minu liked Keijo's style and suggested they hang out more often. They agreed to meet again at school the next day since both had commitments. That's when Minu remembered he had a part-time job after school. Minu thought the day should end on a high note. Taking advantage of the moment when his phone rang, he decided it could be a good opportunity. He gathered the team and announced an emergency meeting for that night, asking everyone to attend. It was essential for TJ and his gang to be there. Everyone was gathered as Minu had requested, but many were complaining about the meeting. Hearing the complaints, TJ smirked and said that if anyone had an issue, they should take it up directly with Minu. Some questioned if something had happened between the two, as TJ's presence had been specifically requested. Feigning ignorance, TJ replied that it wasn't the first time Minu had acted like that. However, June commented that, regardless, Minu was the one who had started the team, so he deserved to be heard. He added that there must have been a reason for calling the meeting at that time. TJ remarked that June was just defending his friend from the same school. Those words made June uncomfortable, but before he could respond, he noticed Minu arriving. Minu walked in with a very serious expression, as if something had happened. TJ, unfazed by his seriousness, continued with his jokes. More irritated than when he arrived, Minu adjusted his jacket and took a ring off his finger. He declared he was going to settle things with TJ and, without hesitation, approached and punched him in the face. The impact knocked TJ to the ground, and he needed help to get back up. No one understood what was happening. Those present demanded an explanation for Minu's seemingly baseless behavior. Minu then stated that TJ needed to stop slandering their team and leave while he could still walk. His declaration surprised everyone, and they wanted to know what he meant. Irritated, TJ asked why Minu had punched him so suddenly. Minu told him not to play dumb, explaining that he didn't want losers like TJ who acted without reason against their members. Smirking, TJ asked if he was talking about the student council president, whom he considered an idiot. He claimed that it was obvious Minu didn't realize that the other guy had started the provocation. TJ then asserted that the one who should leave the team was Minu. Confused, Minu realized that TJ was likely trying to take his place. June, Minu's friend, noticed how the situation was becoming increasingly chaotic. TJ stated that the team members seemed more dissatisfied with Minu than with him. That's when Minu challenged everyone to stop complaining behind his back and say everything to his face. One by one, they began to voice their grievances, saying they didn't like being called to meetings without prior notice. They pointed out that TJ wasn't even officially part of the team, so maybe he had a point. They added that no one should be forced out without consulting everyone first. Someone noted that Minu had made them gather at a specific time just to expel TJ. Satisfied, TJ turned to Minu and highlighted how everyone was dissatisfied with him being there. He also brought up the fact that Minu hadn't been cycling lately due to his injured leg. All he did, TJ claimed, was wander around with girls during the day. He suggested Minu should start his own club at school since, with all his father's money, it wouldn't be hard to form a new group. June stepped in, urging them to stop, saying they had all crossed the line. Minu, after hearing everything, proposed a race to decide who would stay and who would leave Team Zephyrus. June thought it was a terrible idea. TJ liked the proposal and questioned how Minu could even ride with his injured leg. Still, it seemed defeating Minu wouldn't be an issue, even with his injury. TJ accepted the challenge and suggested they make it a 3-on-3 race. It was decided, 3 riders from each team would compete, and the losing team would have to leave, ensuring a fair outcome. Minu said he would be happy to face all 3 of them alone. However, his friend said he would do it as well, even though he knew it would be too much for Minu with his leg in that condition. Still, no one else offered to substitute for the 3, and it seemed like the race would be a showdown between Sunny High and Mountain High. TJ even joked, asking if anyone else would volunteer to run for his team. He added that anyone willing to leave the team along with those idiots would be welcome. The silence from everyone was the response given to the leader of that group. Thus, it was agreed that the competition would be between Sunny High and Mountain High only. TJ, satisfied, was happy it would be a 2-against-3 race. Minu, TJ, and June stared at each other for a while. Sometimes, the school environment could be quite boring, and in those cases, students would even fall asleep. That's what happened to him. He was dreaming that a giant dragon appeared right after he gathered the spheres. Thus emerged the dragon of the dragon spheres, capable of granting a wish. The young student wished for a perfect and proportional body like Chris Hemsworth's. The wish-granting dragon said it was easy, he just needed to eat that mushroom, and the wish would come true. Very satisfied, he took a bite of the magical mushroom, and after feeling intense agony, he transformed completely. Wherever he passed, he made young maidens' hearts race. He became a handsome young man wearing a classic Chesterfield coat, the kind only tall men can pull off. These coats, when balanced, can give a slim silhouette but might conceal a muscular physique. All the girls looked at that posture and wanted a man like that. They asked if he had a girlfriend. Very gallant, he told the girls he could charge for the beats of their hearts, by the digit. And they all agreed to pay, starting to press his head against their ample bosoms. At least that way, he could hear several hearts beating at the same time. The situation was so comfortable that he even drooled on the desk while he slept. Gradually, someone called his name, and the voice seemed distant. Slowly, he opened his eyes and saw his classmate. He was unhappy because it had all been just a dream. Shin Young told his classmate that in his dream, several girls were pressing his head. But when she wanted more details, he said it was nothing and thanked her for the carton of milk she had brought. He had the habit of calling her Little Water, which left her quite discouraged. Drinking the milk, he imagined he could already feel the smooth taste of calcium making him grow taller. One of his friends approached, putting a hand around his neck as if for a friendly headlock. However, it made him waste most of the milk he was drinking. With me, he wanted her to go somewhere with him, as the girl couldn't let her pass. So, he recorded the romance between the buddies, not missing a moment, finding it very interesting. Passing by, in the background, were June and Minu, who asked what he planned to do. The answer was obvious. He planned to win and kick TJ out of the group. His friend was worried about how he would accomplish such a feat, considering his leg wasn't healed yet. Laughing, Minu said the doctor had told him that light cycling would help with recovery. However, his friend warned that a little cycling wouldn't be enough for the race. He also said that with the relay format, they were at a great disadvantage. He suggested asking the student council president, Jay, for help. Minu didn't like the idea. He didn't want to involve Jay in the team's matters anymore, and his friend was becoming worried. A bit bored in the classroom, drawing little bicycles, was the student council president, Jack. He was in that state when someone placed an envelope on his desk. Looking up, he realized it was Mia. She looked at him and said it was something for his injury. She seemed concerned about him, but he simply said he hadn't asked her to get anything like that for him. Seeing that he had hurt his friend, she slammed the desk and said that when a girl tried to help, showing interest, the least he could do was be polite and say, "Thank you." She was upset because her friend had been sad all morning after seeing his injuries. Mia was extremely embarrassed by Yuna's comments. Things got a bit worse when Dam Kang arrived, giving him a hearty slap on the back. Then, he wrapped an arm around his neck and asked if he was tired and if he had stayed up late. Yuna was surprised. She didn't know they were acquainted. Kang said they had connected through a computer screen. She had no idea what he was talking about, and her friend Mia didn't either. A guy called Jay, saying a senior student wanted to talk to him in the hallway. Kang thought Jay was becoming too popular but shrugged it off and went to Yuna's side. As always, she showered him with affection. Rumors were circulating that the two were starting to date and acting a bit strange. While some girls were talking about Yuna and Kang, they didn't notice the third-year boy standing nearby. When they saw him, they became embarrassed, but June was an easygoing guy. The girls left whispering that he was very handsome, though one of them mentioned she'd heard he wasn't interested in girls. June overheard this and felt awkward since the situation wasn't what they assumed. His expression changed, however, when he saw Jay's bruised face. He still didn't know about TJ. That's when he realized this might be why his friend Minu had been so angry with TJ. June, noticing the way Jay was looking at him, thought Jay might not remember him. He even wondered if Jay had some kind of facial recognition issue. So, he spent 5 minutes explaining who he was and how they knew each other. This was helpful because Jay finally understood who June was and remembered meeting him before. June explained that he had approached to ask a favor and shared what Minu had done after seeing Jay's face. He mentioned that he didn't want to involve Jay in those matters anymore but couldn't abandon his friend. Jay was blunt and said he didn't want to get involved with their team anymore. June tried to explain that things had become unfair and that if Minu lost, he would be expelled from his own team. Jay asked why that should matter to him. Still, June shared that the race would take place that night at 8 p.m. in the same location as the previous race. He added that if Jay changed his mind and decided to help, they would be there. The group was already gathered at the race location, and the main topic of discussion was who would win. The loser would be expelled from the group, which heightened the tension. Elsewhere, June sat on a bench, adjusting his shoe. Minu was feeling confident, and calling his friend, said it was time to begin. In reality, it was already 8 minutes past the scheduled time, and June realized he'd been waiting. He began to doubt that Jay would show up, and without him, the situation seemed grim. TJ's team was even more confident, as their numerical advantage of 3 against 2 gave them an edge from the start. June noticed that TJ had added a brake to his bike, possibly due to the incident in the last race. He also asked if TJ had replaced his front wheel with an 8mm carbon one. TJ, as usual, started making snide remarks, pointing out that Minu hadn't been on a bike in ages. Laughing, he told Minu to take it easy or he might end up injuring his other leg too. Tired of TJ's comments, Minu decided it was time to start the race. Before they began, the rules were reviewed, but everyone's attention shifted to the arrival of a girl on a scooter. She managed to capture the attention of all the guys with her bold entrance. Taking off her helmet, she said she was glad she made it in time and introduced herself as Harry Lee. She explained that she was a commentator for a bike show on the internet channel Paprika TV. She had heard about the race and decided to attend. When she removed her helmet, she revealed a stunning face that left all the guys blushing. She also mentioned she hoped to live stream the race if everyone agreed. Minu, ever the charmer, said it would be an honor to have such a beautiful woman document the event. TJ was thrilled at the idea, excited to humiliate Minu online. Harry quickly checked her 4G connection and started her live stream as usual. Viewers found it fascinating to watch a live broadcast of such an important race that would decide who stayed in the group. The person set to explain the race had been interrupted by the charming commentator but now continued. He explained that the event would be a standard relay race, where participants would pass a baton. Instead of batons, LED bracelets would be used. When enough pressure was applied, they would secure themselves to the wrist. He demonstrated how to do it by pressing the correct spot on the bracelet. In summary, the competitors had to deposit the bracelets at designated points, and the first team to complete the handoffs would win. The losing team, as everyone knew, would be expelled from the group. The leader of the losing team was asked if they really wanted to compete. He didn't quite understand the question, but the fact was, with a 3-2 advantage, the race already seemed uneven. He asked them to stop worrying about it. It didn't matter if the opposing team had more members. It was agreed that in the end, no one could complain about unfairness. The competition began, and one member from each team stepped forward to put on their armband. Initially, Minu would face TJ, and the two were already clashing as they grabbed their armbands. Harry Lee broadcasted to her audience that the race would be between Sunny High and Mountain High, and was about to start. She announced that she was preparing to film and share everything with the viewers. TJ was ready to teach a lesson to the losers from the rival school. The first racer would be Hyungmin from Mountain, and his opponent would be June. Minu commented that the first section of the track had several curves, which meant the bike wouldn't offer much advantage. June was worried if he could complete the last 2 stretches with his leg in that condition. The problem was he didn't know if TJ would be the second or third racer and wanted to figure that out somehow. With no other options, his friend agreed to deal with the first racer, leaving the rest of the race to him. June asked his friend not to push himself too hard since he was already prepared to start and handle the rest of the course. The competitors lined up at the starting line, and those who wouldn't race watched the broadcast on their phones. The girl who would do the recording was ready. It was announced that, just like in previous races, the competition would start when the gear touched the flame. The guy with the gear prepared, holding it by the edges of his fingers, ready to let it slowly fall to the ground. As soon as the gear touched the ground, the two started the race. The competition began fiercely, with June performing well at the start. Harry Lee, who was recording, followed closely on her bike, with a camera mounted on her helmet. It was easy to see that the blue armband indicated Mountain High, and the red one represented Sunny High. At that moment, Mountain High took the lead. The race was being streamed live, and people from different places were commenting on it. The crowd waiting for the participants' return also followed the race closely, watching their efforts with each pedal stroke. Despite his effort, June didn't have Minu's skills and struggled to keep pace. The rival from Sunny High asked if that was really all June could manage, despite seeing the effort he was putting in. The Sunny High competitor did his best to close the gap and was almost succeeding. That rival suspected June might be plotting something since he didn't respond to the insults and remained silent. He decided it would be better to increase the gap between them and started pedaling faster. To maintain the lead, the frontrunner pedaled as fast as he could. However, the gap between him and the second place didn't widen. Although he was still ahead, the pressure was mounting because it seemed the second place could overtake him at any moment. That's when he realized the second place racer was using a slipstream technique. June, though he seemed quiet, had his strategies. The commentator also noticed the slipstream and quickly explained to the audience that this technique breaks the wind. This technique, used to reduce air resistance in motorcycle or bicycle races, is called drifting in cycling. The commentator called it a brilliant strategy for a high school race. The audience believed June was simply pedaling behind the leader, waiting for the right moment to use the technique. Even so, overtaking him wouldn't be an easy task. After Hyungmin, no one believed it was possible. However, the rival thought that after crossing the final hill, things would be more favorable for him. That's when the Sunny High competitor, as he passed June, thanked him for breaking the wind. This infuriated his opponent, but what really bothered him was the overtaking, which put the Sunny competitor in the lead. Now, muscle strength mattered most, and the leader shifted to a heavier gear, pedaling with all his energy. Those behind noticed the maneuver and realized he had shifted to a heavier gear. It was announced that the Sunny High racer, with the red armband, had taken the lead, a huge surprise. Sunny High overtook the rival, especially on the uphill stretch, leaving Mountain High gradually falling behind. The gap began to grow, becoming too large to close in such a short time. His friends, following everything online, thought June was incredible. Meanwhile, the second-place rival couldn't understand how June climbed so quickly. Further ahead, the two who had already finished their relay were positioned for the final leg. The sound of Harry Lee's scooter could be heard approaching, indicating they were near the finish line. Minu suggested it was better to prepare and wished his opponent good luck, believing he could catch up. He didn't even know what he was talking about, unaware of who would actually reach the finish line first. Minu asked Jaiwon if his teammate would be able to surpass June, and then the worst happened. Minu saw with his own eyes that it wasn't his teammate approaching. June pointed ahead, and Minu quickly spotted him. This left Jaiwon unsettled, as it represented a disadvantage for their team. June was in the lead, alone, with no competitor nearby. Minu watched proudly, knowing what June was capable of, and June smiled back at him. With all that positive energy, Minu informed his opponent that they'd soon reach the finish line. June quickly removed his bracelet, ready to pass it to his teammate. He wished Minu good luck and then set off, determined to win the race. The commentator noticed that Sunny School's second racer had already secured the bracelet and taken the lead. Their friends, watching online, believed that if Minu could maintain his pace, he'd be the winner. Harry, on her scooter, was positioned just behind Sunny School's second racer. She observed that the second racer was in the lead, far ahead of the other competitor. Soon, he'd enter the third and final segment of the race, and all his team members watching the event noted how fast he was going, likely aware that Minu and June were racing together. Meanwhile, June was drinking an energy drink to replenish himself, though he seemed deep in thought. He just hoped his friend wouldn't push himself too hard and worsen his injury. This thought lingered in his mind, reminding him of the accident where Minu had severely injured his leg. He couldn't shake those memories until, sitting down, he spotted someone familiar in front of him. Meanwhile, in the race, Minu was giving it his all, knowing that if he lost, his friend would also be expelled from the team. However, at one point, his leg began throbbing, and the pain became unbearable. At his position, waiting for the second racer, TJ was anxiously anticipating his turn. He grew frustrated when Someone watching the race commented that he might be the one expelled from the team. The rival school was already in the lead, and TJ was furious, realizing they were pleased with the situation. He thought his teammate was approaching to hand off the bracelet to him, or so he believed. But then he saw the red bracelet, and realized it wasn't his teammate but the rival racer, pulling ahead with a gap too wide to close. Everyone noticed the speed was so high it seemed more like a motorbike than a bicycle. TJ was furious with his teammate, who should have arrived much earlier, making the race harder. Far behind and exhausted, the racer passing the bracelet to TJ was struggling to pedal as fast as he could. On their phones, many people followed the live broadcast, realizing that Sunny School's team had reached the final stretch. Meanwhile, Mountain School's team was still lagging with their second racer, following the race while drying off after her shower to stay updated. The commentator noted that the gap between the teams was widening. This pleased Minu's former friend, who seemed to still harbor a bit of fondness for their friendship. In the race, Minu pedaled desperately, despite the intense pain. At one point, speeding uncontrollably, he spotted a cat in the middle of the road playing with a ball. It was too late to stop. Trying to brake and avoid hitting the cat, Minu overexerted his injured leg, worsening his injury. Without the support of his leg, he fell to the ground in a harsh crash. The commentator narrated everything she saw, and everyone following the live stream was upset. June, his loyal friend, was devastated by the news, while Minu, lying on the ground, realized the race was over. The commentator, stepping in to give Minu first aid, announced that the broadcast would be temporarily paused due to the accident. She turned off the live stream, leaving all viewers in suspense. June knew Minu shouldn't have raced like that, especially with his injured leg. Unaware of the accident, TJ was pedaling as fast as he could, thinking he still had a chance to catch up. To his surprise, further ahead, he saw the fallen bike, Minu on the ground, and the commentator assisting him. It was a sublime moment for TJ, so much so that he smiled. Even the rival knew this outcome was inevitable. From the start, racing with an injured leg had been a massive risk, but TJ thought his luck was unmatched. The competitor on the ground struggled to see who was near him. Slowly, his blurry vision began to clear. Harry Lee approached and asked if he could stand. Turning to the side, he noticed someone else. It was Jay, asking what he was doing on the ground. Minu told him there was no need to stare like that, and that he could just send the message. Jay bent down slightly and removed the bracelet from Minu's arm. Both the guy and the commentator found that strange. However, immediately after, he placed the bracelet on his own arm, remembering that he had already left food for his younger brother along with a note, saying he had just gone out to fix the bike and would be back soon. Still, his younger brother seemed to know exactly what Jay was really up to. June quickly explained the rules and the course, but Minu kept saying he didn't need to go. Jay, seriously, said it shouldn't be misunderstood. He was only going because he had matters to settle. Minu knew that wasn't entirely true, so he forced a smile. At that moment, he called out to Jay and tossed him the helmet. He asked him to teach those losers a proper lesson. Jay looked at the helmet, wondering if he really needed to wear it, as it was sweaty and smelled bad. His friend, noticing his discomfort, complained, saying that his own helmet smelled fine while Jay's was unbearable. The girl, realizing they were well enough to complain, decided to stay put as she prepared to return to the race. As she tried to get on her scooter, she noticed the bike she already recognized from before. Meanwhile, further ahead, TJ was even singing, as he was nearing the end. "I can get through all of this struggle," he thought. "The race is way too easy. This is great." Thus, Minu stopped being annoying and even felt a bit sorry for him, though he shouldn't have tried to race while injured. He found it quite inconvenient to have to finish the race alone. Standing up, Minu, quite cheerful, thought TJ should be worried because a monster was right behind him, and TJ quickly noticed that. He couldn't believe a cyclist was catching up to him. It was monstrous speed. Upon looking more closely, he realized it was Jay. His eyes widened in disbelief, unable to understand what that guy was doing there. That's when he realized the race wouldn't be as easy as he had initially thought. He started pedaling desperately because he knew that if he didn't, the other school would beat him. He realized the one chasing him with such skill on the bike was a beast. He felt like his rival was hunting him like a mad dog. There was so little distance left. TJ thought he had come too far to simply lose like that. He believed he wouldn't be overtaken on the downhill section just ahead. He thought that to secure victory, all he needed to do was outpace him on the downhill. Feeling the constant pressure from his pursuer, sweating but sticking to the plan, he continued as he had intended, as soon as he reached the downhill section. However, he knew it wouldn't be that simple. When he started speeding down the hill, memories of the previous incident flashed through his mind. The fear of another collision overwhelmed him, causing him to brake and lose what little lead he still had. Meanwhile, his opponent was a true beast on the downhill. For him, brakes simply didn't exist. Literally, as his bike didn't even have them, but he didn't care in the slightest. He simply executed a rock walk during the downhill, performing a 180-degree drift. Such maneuvers were routine for him. For that reason, after completing the maneuver, he simply continued on his path, leaving TJ behind. TJ, extremely irritated, knew that any mistake could cost him the race and get him kicked off the team. At a certain moment, however, the racer in the lead sighed deeply and stopped. TJ noticed that Jay had stopped a little ahead and seemed to be watching him intently. He asked what Jay was planning with this and shouted at him to get out of his way. Standing still, Jay stared at TJ, who didn't know what to do and had to hit the brakes. He hoped he could stop in time to avoid colliding with him, but that didn't happen. On the other hand, Jay showed no emotion at all. TJ stopped just a few centimeters short of colliding with Jay. Furious, he wanted to know if Jay had lost his mind to stop like that in front of him. Jay, in turn, said he was there only because TJ had kicked his bike the day before. A strange question from Jay caught TJ completely off guard. Jay continued, saying he wanted to settle things once and for all and see who was truly fast. If it was a challenge TJ wanted, then so be it. Especially since Jay wanted to return the favor. Jay said they would have a no-rules race for the remaining stretch to the finish line. Looking at TJ, he said he wanted to see if that carbon bike was really as fast as it seemed. TJ thought Jay was joking. There was no way that piece of junk could be better than his lightweight bike. Jay, staring back, said that, in the end, he shouldn't blame the bike. He should blame himself. TJ, not liking the direction of the conversation, told Jay to shut up and just get started already. The two positioned themselves correctly to start the race and took off. Both were determined to go as fast as possible to leave the other behind. At first, TJ's carbon bike was slightly ahead by mere millimeters. He smiled, seeing his opponent lagging behind. But it seemed Jay was just warming up. The real race was about to begin. He put so much power into his pedaling that he gained incredible momentum and overtook TJ. TJ couldn't believe he was losing to this guy who had seemingly come out of nowhere and was stealing his victory. Meanwhile, the team members noticed Minu and his friend June returning. They asked each other if Minu was okay and whether they thought he was really in such bad shape. Minu admitted he felt terrible about running the race, saying his leg wasn't fully healed yet. June reminded him that he'd warned him against doing such a reckless thing. Pushing his leg that way was irresponsible. Looking downcast, Minu acknowledged that racing with an injured leg had been a mistake. Harry Lee remarked that he was lucky not to have been hurt worse after crashing at such speed. TJ's other two team members seemed satisfied, believing they had won. But then they looked closer and noticed someone approaching alongside TJ. The person was carrying a red flag, leaving them wondering who it could be. Their team had only 2 members, and they didn't know of anyone else on Sunny School's team. Jay had taken the lead, and there was nothing TJ could do about it. For TJ, it felt like the end. Everything was already lost. He couldn't understand why his expensive bike couldn't perform as well as his opponent's so-called junk bike. At the finish line, everyone was shocked, but soon they recognized the person with the red flag. It was the president of the Sunny School Student Council, the same person who had raced against TJ before, someone many considered not very friendly. Protests erupted, claiming it was unfair since the race had been a 2v3. As Jay crossed the finish line, his expression showed complete indifference. Meanwhile, TJ was visibly dejected, having lost once again to the same person. Jay removed his helmet and commented that it seemed that the junk wasn't his bike. TJ was infuriated, taking the comment to mean that the junk was him. When it looked like TJ was about to start a fight, people reminded him that the guy wasn't even part of the team. Nobody understood why this outsider had joined Sunny School's team for the race. It didn't make sense for someone not on the team to interfere in the competition. Minu clarified that he had accepted at the start that it would be a 3v2 race, regardless of the final result. He added that the moment he fell off his bike, the race had already ended for them. Smiling, Minu told TJ there was no need to say all those things. He simply tore off the team emblem from his jacket and threw it to the ground. Everyone watched Minu's actions, with some feeling saddened and others thinking he'd gone too far. Before leaving, he looked back and commented that he hoped they were happy now and asked them to take care of the team. He cast a sad glance at a few members, but he knew there wasn't much more he could do. June touched his shoulder, and they left together. Minu felt bad about losing. As a result, his friend had to leave the team alongside him. For June, it wasn't a big deal. They could walk away together and form a new team. Shortly after, Jay tossed the helmet toward Minu. Catching the helmet, Minu thanked him for the support during the race. Jay didn't respond, simply ignoring him, turning away, and riding off on his bike. Minu realized Jay hadn't changed at all. Harry Lee noticed something about Jay. He was riding a bike inherited from someone she knew well. Minu moved forward, though his leg still hurt significantly, and his friend offered to take him home. Minu insisted he didn't need to be treated like a child and said his house was nearby. Despite winning the race, TJ wasn't excited. It was the second time he felt the sting of defeat. His friends asked if he was coming with them, but TJ was lost in distant thoughts. He pondered over the humiliation he had suffered and what people would say about his defeat. Someone approached and commented on the bitter look on his face. TJ, ready to fight, stood up but restrained himself when he realized who it was. Vinny Hong asked if he was the fool who had tried to challenge him. Seeing Vinny, TJ felt satisfied, It had been a long time since he'd seen his friend. TJ smiled and asked what Vinny was doing there. Vinny jokingly replied, asking if he wasn't allowed to be there. The friend replied that, of course, he didn't mean it that way. Vinny explained that he had watched the race, and it seemed Minu's leg was fine. However, TJ's friends commented that Minu was nothing more than a fool now. It was explained that they had won the race and, as agreed, left the team. Vinny joked, saying that with the cat gone, the mice had come out to play. The three who competed against Minu's team seemed kind. Vinny mentioned that the team was disbanded, and there was nothing left to do. Meanwhile, TJ thought that guy wasn't even part of his team anymore. Vinny showed interest in Minu's activities and said he seemed fine, based on the race. However, he suggested Minu be careful with his leg and said he would leave the team. This left TJ confused, not understanding what Vinny really meant. A few petals later, they were in front of Minu's house, where he was despondent over losing the race and his team. He felt upset about being expelled from his own team and thought that if it weren't for his leg. At that moment, Minu's parents arrived, and his gaze met his father's. Minu greeted his father, who immediately asked loudly what he was doing outside. The father wanted to know what had happened since Minu was supposed to be studying. The father's wife, who wasn't Minu's mother, tried to calm things down, saying it was just a teenage thing. Noticing a cut on Minu's face, she asked how he had gotten hurt. Gently, she approached to examine the wound, asking if he had fallen off his bike. Without thinking, the boy asked her to take her hands off him. She was shocked, not expecting such a rude reaction, especially in front of his father. In an attempt to discipline him, the father punched him and repeatedly called him a thug. The father said he should show respect since he was the eldest son, but the boy didn't care. He accused the father's wife of only wanting his money and taking advantage of his mother's absence. Furious, the father accused him of using money for his own benefit, and even mentioned the bike he had bought him. Shouting, he demanded that his son hand over his wallet and all his credit cards. In defiance, the son threw the wallet on the ground and said he didn't need his money. After hearing those words, the father, even more frustrated, kicked him out of the house. His twin sister, watching from the window, felt deeply saddened by the argument. She retreated and quietly murmured that it was all her fault. Elsewhere, in a random corner, the boy stood near a vending machine. Sitting on a bench with his bike, he reflected on not having money or a place to go. That day was awful. No money, expelled from his team, and now kicked out of his house. To make matters worse, he watched a happy family passing by. Seeing the children's joy reminded him of the time spent with his sisters and mother. The happy image of his mother was the only thing bringing him comfort during those tough days. He and his twin sister had been very close, and he still remembered his promise to take care of them. Back then, he was a kind and happy young man, living in a home filled with love. But now, all he could do was sit on that bench near his bike and cry. In that complicated state, with tears constantly filling his eyes, he heard someone nearby taking an energy drink from the vending machine. Looking over, he saw the person staring at him and sarcastically asking if he was crying like a baby over losing. Minu responded that he definitely wasn't crying. The guy gave him a skeptical look, clearly doubting his words. After that, he turned his back and walked away. However, Minu needed to ask him for a favor. When he managed to get the guy's attention, he asked what Minu wanted. Beaming, thinking there was no other possible answer than yes, Minu asked if he could stay at his house for the night. The guy simply walked off without even giving him a reply. Minu persisted, explaining it would just be for one night since he had no money and had been kicked out of his house. The guy responded that it wasn't his problem, making Minu think of him as a heartless demon. Despite this, Minu kept insisting, saying it would only be that one time. Jay, however, explained that he needed to get back to studying and suggested Minu ask another friend for help. Minu replied that he had no one else to turn to. Jay then made it clear that he wasn't the right person to help either. At that moment, Minu realized they were just schoolmates, and nothing more. Faced with this harsh reality, he understood he was alone. He no longer had a team or a home. The few people who approached him were only interested in his family's social and financial status. No one around him genuinely cared about him. Their interest was solely in his father's wealth. People got close because they knew he was the son of a prominent businessman. Minu, out of convenience, also put on a mask to deal with everyone. His father was always surrounded by lies and fake people. This was the reality Minu had always known. As a result, he also started hiding his true self, wearing countless masks. Since childhood, whenever he took off those masks, he found himself alone. As a child, he discovered a way to escape loneliness. He got a bicycle. The bicycle became his refuge, and he developed a passion for cycling, eventually forming his own cycling group. Initially, the group was made up of people who simply enjoyed cycling. It was called Team Zephyrus. Unfortunately, he lost even his team, and his situation worsened when it started to rain. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed a cat, also caught in the rain, trembling from the cold. Upon closer observation, he realized he had seen that cat before and tried to confirm if it was the same one that had caused him to fall once. For a moment, he felt anger toward the animal, But that emotion quickly faded when he saw its injured paw. Compassion overtook Minu. Blaming the cat wouldn't change anything, so he shared some of his food with it. He noticed the feline was gentle, eating straight from his hand. Upon closer examination, he realized the cat couldn't leave because of its injured paw. He picked up the wet, shivering cat in his arms and realized it, too, was alone, just like him. Nearby, a boy with glasses and an umbrella was heading home. When he arrived, he found a strange young man standing in the rain in front of his house. The boy recognized him as one of the idiots who hung out with his brother but couldn't understand what he was doing there. Minu also recognized the boy and sarcastically asked if he was that little pest from before. However, the boy's attention was focused on the cat, which seemed to be the true priority. Inside the house, the boy reflected while watching the rain. Moved by the situation, he grabbed an umbrella and went out to check on the young man. To his surprise, he saw his brother coming inside with the cat in his arms. Curious, he asked where the cat had come from. His brother explained that the animal had been shivering in the rain, so he brought it inside. Hearing this, Minu started to feel some sympathy for the boy, who showed genuine concern. However, the boy clarified that he couldn't leave the cat out in the cold, and had only brought Minu along because they were together. Minu realized it was a mistake to expect too much from that irritating kid. Jay, on the other hand, observed his brother as he carefully cleaned the cat and got food for it. Then he found himself face to face with Minu, who was now inside his house. Minu told Jay he would leave as soon as the rain stopped and remained quiet. Suddenly, a towel was tossed over his head. Jay gestured toward the bathroom and told Minu to take a shower. Though surprised, Minu seemed to appreciate the gesture, even if he didn't show much reaction. Jay quickly added that this was just for today and that Minu shouldn't expect anything more from him. Even so, Jay's brother found it strange to let that guy sleep in their house, though Minu insisted he wasn't a homeless person. After his shower, Minu felt refreshed. There was nothing better than a warm shower and a clean house. He announced he was hungry and, without hesitation, opened the fridge to look for food. At that moment, he heard footsteps and a woman asking about a bike outside that she didn't recognize. When she entered the kitchen, Jay's mother was surprised to see him rummaging through the fridge. Startled, Minu politely greeted the lady. When she saw him, the woman realized who he was, the son of one of the town's prominent figures. She quickly prepared a meal for him. She asked him to make himself at home. Minu was pleased since fried chicken with sauce was his favorite. Pleased, she asked Jay how he had managed to make such a valuable friend. Her son simply replied that they weren't friends. The younger brother then reminded their mother that she always said friends were useless. Trying to silence him, she threw a chicken drumstick at him. She told him to finish eating quickly and go study since exams were coming up. Suddenly, she heard a meow. Looking toward the stairs, she saw a cat and asked where it had come from. The younger brother, already scolded, noticed Minu's reaction and pointed at him, saying it was his fault for bringing the cat in. Quickly, he placed all the blame on Minu and ran to hug the cat, which had already been named Jack. The two realized that the boy had already given the animal a name. Trying to be subtle, the mother smiled and told her son it would be better to return the cat once the guest left. But the boy, with his mouth messy from sauce and hugging the cat, pretended everything would go as she wanted. Noticing the slightly injured faces of the two, the woman asked if they had been in a fight. Jay, to avoid answering, quickly drank some soda, keeping himself from speaking. The responsibility fell on Minu, who stammered, saying they had fought with some boys. The woman became furious, saying she would go after those responsible, as no one could insult someone so valuable. She wanted to know which school they were from, but the boy said he wasn't sure since they were wearing casual clothes. Minu tried to calm her down, assuring her it wouldn't happen again. Jay quietly stood up, thanked her for the dinner, and went to his room, being watched by Minu and the mother. The woman commented that Jay's grades were dropping. She also said that if this continued, he wouldn't be allowed to ride his bike anymore. Jay simply replied that he understood and left for his room. Minu entered shortly after since he would be sleeping there. Upon noticing Jay on the computer, he asked what he was doing. Jay just glanced at him and didn't answer. Soon after, Minu was already lying on the bed, commenting that he was so full and the bed was very soft. almost asleep. He said he thought Jay's life wasn't easy either, as his mother pressured him to be the best in class. But he added that he envied Jay because he had a mother who was present and spoiled him like that. Jay turned off the light and used his feet to try to push the intruder off his bed. Minu insisted he couldn't sleep without a bed and suggested they could share it. Annoyed, Jay made a spot on the floor for himself to sleep. Surprisingly, Jay struck up a conversation, asking when Minu started cycling. Minu replied that it was during childhood when he saw a boy riding in the park and thought it looked fun. He also mentioned that the boy must be really good at it today. That's when he got the idea of forming a cycling team together. Jay told him to stop talking nonsense and sleep because he was being a bother. Minu thought Jay was always like that and said he should be more positive sometimes. He also mentioned he would be staying for a few more days. This caught Jay's attention, and he got up to ask what Minu was talking about. Minu explained that Jay's mother had said he could stay as long as he needed. The situation didn't sit well with Jay. Minu turned to face the corner and sent a message to his sister, asking her to bring more clothes. He told her he was fine, that he was at Jay's house, and would be sleeping there. She asked for the address to bring the clothes. Soon after, sleep overcame him, and he drifted off. In the morning, the smell of something cooking in the kitchen piqued his interest. Still sleepy, he went to check what was going on. With blurry vision, he thought he saw an elderly woman cooking. When he fully woke up, he realized it was Jay, wearing a cat print apron. Jay explained that his mother had left early for work. Minu couldn't contain his laughter, finding the scene hilarious. He asked if it was some kind of cosplay. Jokingly, he said he needed to take a picture and post it on social media, but he laughed so hard he couldn't focus to take the photo. He asked about Jay's younger brother, who was outside playing with Jack. Minu found it strange that the boy was up early to play with the cat. Seeing the dish Jay was preparing, Minu thought it was a special breakfast in his honor. He was already holding a spoon when he realized the food wasn't for him. He questioned where Jay was taking the food, and Jay replied it was for the cat. Minu complained, saying he was starving and that Jay shouldn't give his food to the cat. Jay, in turn, told Minu to prepare his own breakfast. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the city, Sunny High's principal was getting ready for another workday. His phone rang, and he wondered who could be calling so early. Hearing the voice of Shelly, his granddaughter, he felt proud and wanted to know how she was. She said she was returning to Korea and wanted to see him. He replied, smiling, that he couldn't wait. Shelly confirmed she would call upon arrival. The beautiful blonde girl, with a bike in her room, seemed to share the same interest in cycling. Early in the morning, Minu was taking care of his bike, checking the finer details. He was surprised by the arrival of his sister Yuna, who brought the clothes he had asked for the previous day. She asked what he was doing. Minu replied that he was just fixing the bike since it got wet the day before. Yuna, who had a certain annoyance with her brother's bike, handed him the bag of clothes and told him to stop being stubborn and go back home. She said she would take care of their father, but Minu still didn't seem convinced. Surprised, Yuna commented that she found it strange he preferred staying at Jay's house and that she also didn't expect Jay to be so nice to him. Minu explained that, despite Jay being stubborn, things were going well. Yuna offered him a ride in the family car to school, but Minu, proud as ever, refused. He said he would go by bike and suggested that she should start cycling too. Ignoring the advice, Yuna said she would see him later and told him not to be late. She got in the car and went to school, leaving behind the image of her brother with his bike. As Minu waved goodbye, Kay, who had been there all along, asked if Yuna was his girlfriend. Only then did Minu notice the boy's presence. Indignant, Minu replied that he would never have such an ugly girlfriend, and explained that she was his sister. Then, he asked how long Kay had been there. Kay, ignoring the question, started talking to the cat, Jack, and remarked that it was obvious Minu, a delinquent crashing at someone else's house, couldn't have a girlfriend. Minu thought that if Kay were his brother, he would have taught him a lesson by now. Smiling, Kay said goodbye to the cat, stating he had to go to school and asking the animal to watch over the house. Minu stayed behind with the cat. Meanwhile, Jay, who was getting ready for school, ignored Minu but gave him a glance when called. Minu asked if Jay would ride his bike to school. Jay replied that he wasn't sure and asked why. Minu said he was out of bus money and would ride his bike, suggesting they go together since it would be more fun. Jay just looked at him without responding. Soon, the two were on the bike path. Unaccustomed to using it, Minu complained about how poorly planned it was, full of obstacles like trees and fire extinguishers. Jay, on the other hand, was indifferent since he was used to riding there. Minu suggested they pass through the park, a calmer route. He even proposed ditching class to keep cycling, but Jay's expression made it clear the idea wouldn't fly. Minu also noticed Jay wasn't wearing a helmet and offered to get him one. Shortly after, he remembered he had no money and dropped the idea. Jay, used to his friend's stories, told him to stop talking nonsense and keep pedaling. Minu suggested a race to school, but Jay declined, saying he could compete with himself. At school, the environment was as usual, noisy, filled with voices. Mia seemed impressed by something Yuna was saying. Mia commented that she never imagined seeing Minu and Jay getting along so well. Yuna agreed, saying it seemed like they had only recently started liking each other. Mia found Yuna's phrasing funny and joked that she should be careful since others might interpret it the wrong way. Yuna reminded Mia about the student council meeting over the weekend, which would be held at a cafe. Mia liked the idea but asked if Jay would allow the meeting to take place outside the school. Yuna explained that, with most department heads being girls, they could pressure him into agreeing. Satisfied, Mia commented that it would be her chance for a date with her beloved Jay. Yuna made it clear she was helping Mia, but she needed to ensure they ended up alone in the end. Embarrassed, Mia said she didn't need that much help. Meanwhile, Dom Kong, overhearing the conversation, suggested he might show up at the meeting and asked if he could join. Annoyed, Yuna reminded him he wasn't even on the council and asked what he wanted to do there. Dom Kong said he could be her assistant, but Yuna simply told him to stop being silly. He insisted, inviting her to watch a zombie movie after the meeting. Mia, observing from a distance, thought the two looked good together, but Yuna made it clear she didn't like that type of movie. It was then that Mia looked out the window and saw Jay and Minu arriving by bike. She commented to Yuna about her desire to buy a bike, saying the weather had been great lately. Yuna suggested that, when buying the bike, Mia should ask Jay to teach her how to ride it. Dom Kong, once again butting in, said he would also buy a bike, but Yuna replied that she didn't care. As Minu entered the school with his bike, he caught the attention of the girls, as always. Meanwhile, two boys in a corner were reading a magazine featuring beautiful girls. The class leader arrived, interrupting their fun, saying she needed to keep everything organized. The two were annoyed but couldn't do anything. It was then that they noticed Minu entering the room with his bicycle and parking it in a corner. Curious, one of the boys asked Minu why he had brought the bicycle inside. Minu responded by asking if he had any idea of the value of the bicycle and said he couldn't leave it outside. When the boy asked how much it cost, he was shocked by the mentioned amount. He thought the price was absurd and commented that the bike might as well be made of gold. Even so, the boy expressed a desire to ride the bicycle, but upon noticing the very high seat, he gave up, frustrated. In Jay's class, Yuna appeared to talk about the upcoming student council meeting. She said everyone wanted it to be at a cafe and asked what he thought. Jay didn't seem to like the idea, but Yuna decided it would be that way anyway and left, singing something. Later, Yuna told Mia that everything had gone as planned and asked her to dress well to make a good impression. Just imagining the situation made Mia blush, worried since she wasn't used to dressing up. Mia was in her room, facing a dilemma. What outfit would be ideal for an event as special as the cafe meeting? With several pieces scattered across the bed, she tried on one after another in front of the mirror, trying to decide. She was also concerned about her hair and makeup. Her moment of doubt was interrupted by the sound of her phone. It was her friend Yuna, asking if she was ready since she was on her way to pick her up. Desperate, Mia replied that she'd be ready in just a few minutes. With no time to prepare as she'd hoped, she grabbed a dress she thought was appropriate and did her best with the little time she had. Meanwhile, at Jay's house, the atmosphere was quiet. Minu, bored, complained about having no money and no fun on a weekend. Outside, he watched couples walking by and Kay, who seemed to be obsessed with cats. When he saw Jay getting ready to leave, Minu asked where he was going. Jay explained he was going to a student council meeting. Surprised, Minu questioned why anyone would have a meeting on the weekend and asked to tag along since he was bored. Jay refused, saying he preferred to go alone. Minu, disappointed, held the door and said he'd take care of the house, asking Jay to bring back something nice, like ice cream. Jay just looked at him without replying. At the cafe where the meeting was scheduled, the atmosphere was calm, with a few people scattered at tables. One couple, in particular, seemed to be enjoying themselves, but at Yuna's table, the mood was more uncomfortable. Yuna noticed Dom Kong nearby, praising the bagels at the place. A little late, Mia arrived, embarrassed, saying she hadn't expected everyone to already be there. Her different, more polished appearance left Dom Kong initially confused, as he didn't recognize her. This made her even more self-conscious until she mentioned he should recognize her by her voice. Yuna got excited seeing Mia without her glasses, suggesting she should wear contact lenses more often. Mia thanked her for the compliments, and explained it was just a temporary change. One of the guys at the meeting, while flirting with his girlfriend, commented on how stunning Mia looked without glasses. His girlfriend, however, scolded him, calling him a pig. Dom Kong, observing the couple, asked Yuna if she'd like to fight with him like that too, but she ignored him. At another table, Vinny was annoyed. His friends were commenting on a group that was staring at them judgmentally. Vinny noticed the people at the other table were talking about his appearance, particularly his left eye of a different color, insinuating it was a contact lens or cosplay. Tired of the jokes, he had the brilliant idea to stand up and confront the group. He grabbed one of their coffee cups, pretended to take a sip, and complained that the coffee was sour. This drew everyone's attention. Vinny then asked the group if his eye color was so strange as to make them uncomfortable. He even sarcastically suggested they pluck out his eye to check if it was real. The guys at the table were taken aback, asking him to stop. But Vinny, in a friendly tone, kicked their table, causing a commotion and making one of them fall off their chair. The ruckus caught the attention of Dom Kong, who was with his friends. Vinny continued pressuring the group, putting his foot on one of the fallen guys and asking if he wanted to hear more. Without realizing it, Vinny spilled hot coffee on another guy, but claimed it was unintentional. A girl in the group asked for help to break up the commotion, but no one intervened, as it seemed to be just an argument. Dom Kong, seeing the hot coffee spilling, tried to hold Vinny's hand to avoid further trouble. However, Vinny didn't appreciate Dom Kang's intervention and stared at him, clearly irritated. The atmosphere grew tense when Dom Kong decided to mediate the situation at the other table. As he tried to intervene and ask for calm, Vinny continued pouring hot drinks over a guy. Unintentionally, he spilled the rest. The guy, who had previously mocked Vinny's appearance, finding his eyes and hair color funny, was now on the floor, backing away like a frightened dog. He begged for someone to call the police to stop that lunatic. Vinny, giving a light flick to Dom Kang's cap, asked what the problem was. Dom Kong, in turn, simply fixed his gaze on the guy who had taken his cap but did not touch him in any way. At that moment, someone caught his attention. It was Yuna. Hearing her voice, he turned to see what she wanted to say. She asked him to put his fists away and avoid causing trouble, at least that time. Dom Kong adjusted his hair but continued staring at the guy, though in a different manner. Meanwhile, Vinny's friend tried to intervene to prevent the situation from escalating. In a low tone, he suggested that Vinny leave before things got out of hand. Vinny, always eccentric, stuck out his tongue at Dom Kong before leaving. As he turned his back, he said they would finish that conversation somewhere more private. Hearing the provocations, Dom Kong bent down, picked up the cap, and placed it back on his head. Then he walked over to Yuna and stated that he hadn't caused any trouble that day. Yuna, seemingly satisfied, didn't explicitly show her approval. She simply said he had done a good job. Elsewhere, elegant footsteps accompanied by high heels and a sophisticated suitcase stood out in the crowd. The men present couldn't help but stare, almost slack-jawed. The blonde woman, with striking beauty, drew gazes wherever she went. Even women stopped to watch her. Some couples lightly argued when their partners disrespectfully cast curious glances her way. Among those present, a confident man who considered himself attractive decided to make a move. After fixing his hair and adjusting his appearance, he commented to a friend about the European woman's beauty. Proudly, he declared that he knew enough French to get by and headed toward her, convinced his charm was enough. Before approaching her, he told his friend not to worry since his strategy was 99% charisma and 1% basic French. The friend, skeptical, believed he needed a reality check since the blonde seemed out of his league. The woman, noticing the sidelong glances, thought about how predictable and inconvenient many men could be. When he finally approached, attempting to impress her with his French, she calmly replied that they could speak in Korean. Finding his behavior odd, she naturally answered when he asked if she spoke Korean and where she was from. The man explained that he had been drinking coffee when he spotted an angel and felt the need to follow her. Then he asked if she had a boyfriend. Handing her his phone, he asked her to write down her number so they could communicate later. As he casually pedaled a bicycle, she wrote something on her phone. At that moment, two men on a scooter appeared. The one in front wore an Iron Man mask. The second man indicated that their target was ahead, the blonde woman with the seemingly valuable suitcase. They sped toward the woman, who still held the man's phone in her hand. She, indifferently, handed the phone back, saying she would send a message later. The man, confident, believed she was just feigning disinterest. Nevertheless, he was sure of his success. However, when he checked the number she had supposedly written, he realized it was fake. As he examined the phone, the two men on the scooter sped by, snatching the woman's bag. With the bag as a trophy, they fled as quickly as possible. The woman, upset by the theft, tried to react but it was useless. The cyclist, though hooded and pedaling quickly, noticed the scene. Even though he seemed in a hurry, he appeared to have a clear destination in mind. After the director's granddaughter saw the cyclist pass by, following the theft committed by two men on a motorbike, Jay rode at an extreme speed. She wanted to know what he was doing. Construction workers were taking a break, smoking their cigarettes. They were startled when Jay sped past them and borrowed a worker's helmet. Now that he was properly protected, he could pedal quickly without putting his life at risk. At the cafe, the cleaning staff was organizing the space for the next customers. They thought that instead of causing a mess, the patrons could just quietly enjoy their coffee and leave. Some people watched them clean and were annoyed at the mess they had to deal with. And the young man, who had been enjoying the affectionate attention of his girlfriend earlier, thought that if everything hadn't been resolved, he would have handled it himself, as memories from his school days, when he was known as Bloody Prey, would resurface. However, despite all his words, all the girls were pleased with Dom Kang's bravery. He said he didn't want to fight or anything, just to scare people a little. That wasn't how Yuna saw it. She told him he shouldn't behave like a tough guy because that wasn't true bravery. He simply hadn't thought things through. However, Mia had something she had always wanted to ask him. She wanted to know if he was interested in revealing his feelings for her. Smiling awkwardly, she said that wasn't what she wanted to ask but instead the reason why he always wore a band-aid on his upper lip. He didn't find it very amusing and pointed to his upper lip, asking if that's what she was talking about. Yuna told him that someone was bound to ask about it eventually. Mia was curious and wanted to know what was hidden there, as he always covered it up. She said it would be their secret. He said he would show her but insisted they couldn't tell anyone. Then, as he pulled off the band-aid, his secret was finally revealed. However, the sight caught the girls' attention because, all this time, he had just been hiding a mustache. They thought it was strange for a high school student to already have a mustache. One of the boys at the table thought it was really cool, so much so that he imagined himself with a mustache and beard, thinking it would make him look more masculine. Mia was impressed that he was still in high school and already had a mustache. The boy at the table speculated that he might have a secret, perhaps a miraculous gel that made hair grow quickly, giving any man a more virile appearance. He begged Dom Kong to let him use it, even if just once. Dom Kong said he couldn't, as it was very hard to find in the black market. The girls couldn't understand why anyone would go through so much trouble just to grow a mustache, only to cover it with a band-aid later. He explained that the mustache was for his part-time job, as it made him look older and more serious. He said the teachers couldn't find out, or he'd have to shave it immediately. That's why he kept it hidden with the band-aid. Mia finally understood why he was always so tired in class. He got exhausted from his part-time job. One girl wanted to know what his father did for a living that would require him to do such things too. He replied that his father handled the administrative side of an organization. However, from an outsider's perspective, it didn't seem that way. He looked more like the leader of a mafia, dealing with other big shots of the same caliber. When they were all together, the situation seemed even more intimidating. But as gangsters, they had to maintain their composure. Nevertheless, his father was returning to Korea that day. The girl wanted to know if his father handled the administrative side of the organization like a regular civil employee or something similar. He just burst out laughing, trying to change the mood and the conversation. Mia, trying to escape the conversation, grabbed a ticket and said she was going to get more coffee. She got up from the table happily, ready to fetch coffee, while someone started taking pictures of her. It seemed like someone had taken an interest in her appearance, as at that moment she looked truly stunning. Elsewhere, the president of the student council was pedaling at full speed on his bike, wearing a borrowed helmet, chasing down the thieves. The men on the motorcycle thought they had hit the jackpot but realized that someone was chasing them. They were startled to see someone pursuing them on a bicycle. They couldn't believe anyone would try to catch a motorcycle on a bike. However, when they checked the rearview mirror, they saw he was indeed trying to catch up with them. They thought he'd never be able to corner them with just a bicycle. He'd have to be more clever than that. Nonetheless, Jay started pedaling harder, weaving between cars to keep the motorcycle in sight. Continuing his bicycle pursuit of the motorcycle, whose riders had stolen the blonde woman's purse, he was already accustomed to obstacles and difficult paths. He could easily ride up ramps, jump small walls, and dodge cars. None of that was a problem for him. So taking a shortcut to intercept those criminals wouldn't be too challenging. He was so used to such situations that he now found himself riding on top of a wall. Nearby, on a court, some boys were playing and kicking a ball around. One of them kicked it hard, and the ball was headed straight for the boy riding on the wall. The little kids, amazed, thought he might be part of a bicycle attack squad, as they couldn't believe anyone could pedal on a wall. Some of them thought he was amazing in that, given the choice, a bike was cooler than a ball. While the motorcyclists thought they had spotted the man on the bike, the cyclist found it odd to chase a motorcycle with a bicycle. Nevertheless, he kept pedaling on the wall, using his shortcut, until he finally caught sight of the motorcycle. The motorcyclist said the guy had scared him for a few seconds, but he soon realized it was just nonsense. However, he became even more frightened when he saw the bicycle flying. After gaining momentum on the wall, the cyclist was, indeed, airborne. He passed over some kids who were eating ice cream. They were quite impressed to see a man flying on a bicycle. The motorcyclists were equally impressed and terrified at the same time. The children watching thought it was all amazing. It was incredible to see someone riding a bike so daringly. Although the cyclist threw the bicycle at the motorcycle to stop the criminals, the kids still found it fascinating to see a bike flying through the air. The cyclist got up, landing on some boxes along with the motorcyclists. He simply looked at the criminals, who tried to run away but left the bag behind, not wanting to be chased again. Shortly after, Shay approached in a white car and asked how the guy was doing. Although he seemed to have a slight injury on his head or forehead, it was hard to tell because the helmet covered it. She wanted to take him to the hospital, but he simply handed her the bag, adjusted the bicycle, and kept carrying it, as the bike was in such bad condition that he couldn't ride it anymore. Even so, the girl insisted, worried that he might be seriously hurt. Seeing it was no use, she simply thanked him for retrieving the bag. Jay took out his phone and made a call, informing that he wouldn't make it in time because he had been in an accident. Yuna became worried and asked if he was hurt, and if there was anything she could do to help. Dom Kong, curious, asked what had happened. She explained that Jay had been in a bicycle accident, and said he wouldn't be able to attend the meeting. The conversation caught Mia's attention, and she asked if he was okay. Yuna replied that, judging by his voice, he didn't seem seriously injured, but he hadn't given many details. Someone then suggested that maybe he didn't want to attend the meeting, and had made up an excuse. Yuna stated that he wasn't the type to avoid responsibilities. It was agreed that they would all stay a little longer, and then leave. Mia was visibly disappointed and said she was going to the bathroom. Once there, she looked at herself in the mirror and reflected that everything seemed meaningless, though she still hoped Jay was okay. When she left the bathroom, she was approached by a guy who introduced himself as CJ Kim and said he worked for SC Magazine. He had been watching her and thought she fit the type of model they were looking for. If she was interested, she could contact him. After saying this, he handed her a card and added that she could call whenever she needed. She was impressed by the situation and looked at the card, surprised. Mia, Yuna, and Dom Kong said goodbye to the other part of the team, saying they would meet at school. Now, the friends talked about how unfortunate it was that Jay hadn't come since Mia had put in so much effort. She looked very pretty, and Yuna encouraged her to cheer up, saying there would definitely be another chance. Yuna also wanted to know who the guy Mia had been talking to in front of the bathroom was. Showing the card, Mia explained who he was. Looking at the card, her friend commented that the fashion magazine was very famous, so the guy surely had good intentions. Meanwhile, Minu, at Jay's house, was watching a music show while the cat played with a ball on the floor near him. Hugging a pillow on the floor, Minu thought it was very boring to stay home alone. At the same time, Jay was walking, carrying his bicycle to get it repaired, when he entered a specialty shop. Politely, he excused himself. In front of him was a girl with a military cap and some tattoos. The girl, friendly and wearing a white tank top, welcomed him. He explained he was there to fix his bike. She then remembered him from race day and asked if he remembered her since she had watched the race footage. However, she noticed he had no idea what she was talking about. It seemed he had a knack for forgetting people and things. He was there to fix the bike, but she decided to administer first aid since he had a small cut on his forehead. He wasn't pleased, as he wanted her to fix his bike as quickly as possible, without worrying about him. He said he knew what her job was, but that the bike should be the priority after she took care of him first. Looking at the bike, she realized it was really damaged. The fork and the front wheel were completely unusable. At least the bike frame was still intact, which was a relief considering he had crashed the bike while trying to chase away the thieves. Even though the girl was very pretty and her tank top highlighted her tattoos, he wasn't focused on that but rather on the photo of his uncle on the wall. That photo brought back old memories, specifically of the final stage of the Tour de France, which was nearing its end. He remembered watching that epic race on his computer, and for the first time in history, a Korean cyclist was in the lead. Then came the English athlete, speeding up behind him. Mark advanced and overtook him in an instant. The two were sprinting toward the finish line, and he recalled his uncle's words, telling him that if he had a dream, he should go after it. At that time, the boy said he wanted to be a doctor, but his uncle insisted the dream should be his own, not his parents'. The boy retorted, saying he couldn't be more than a student, and all he could do was study to please his parents. The uncle also commented that studying wasn't a real dream. It was too boring to be just a dream. Studying was important, but finding something you truly enjoy doing and living life was even better. Those words made the boy wish to find something he could truly enjoy. So, he asked his uncle if he had a dream. Smiling, the uncle replied that his dream was to be on top of the world in cycling. He thought it might not be possible, but at the same time, he wanted it so badly and believed that with dedication, nothing was impossible. On the day of that race, he was the first Korean cyclist in the history of cycling to win that final stage. He remembered watching the race when his parents asked if he still had his computer on because he had homework and needed to sleep early. He recalled turning off the computer with a peaceful mind, thinking his uncle had made it and that nothing in the world was impossible. The memories of his youth faded as the girl asked if he knew the cyclist, as he wasn't very famous in Korea. In Korea, cycling was taken very seriously, and he was a national cyclist, having won first place in several Asian competitions. She also mentioned that he had won the final stage of the Tour de France, every cyclist's dream, Mahonjo. Then, she looked at him and asked if he knew that cyclist. Jay replied that he was his uncle. Harry had already suspected as much because she recognized the bike Jay used for training on asphalt before becoming a cyclist. She also noticed the name on the bike, as cyclists often name their bikes, and she showed him the inscription on it. The bike was named Mahonjo. That's when Jay asked how she knew his uncle. She said she admired him so much that she became the leader of a fan club created exclusively for him. Then, she started thinking about how to repair the bike. She knew she would need to replace the entire front part, and suggested he return in 2 days. He didn't seem happy about leaving the bike behind but agreed to come back later. She asked him to wait a moment. She handed him a flyer, saying he might be interested in joining the street league since they were organizing a long-distance championship. The first-place winner would receive a prize of 100,000 won and the chance to participate in an international championship. He flatly refused, but she said that if he changed his mind and wanted to participate with his friends, he could get in touch. He firmly stated that he had exams next month and couldn't participate. She smiled and said that was fine, but he should come back to pick up the bike and also visit the hospital. He left and started walking, seeming to search for something in his pocket, when he realized he had dropped his wallet. At home, feeling bored, he was listening to music, unaware that he had lost his wallet. Shelley's grandfather was very happy to arrive and see that his favorite granddaughter was there. He mentioned how much he missed her, and while she rummaged through Jay's wallet, she noticed he was a student at a school. She asked her grandfather if she could enroll in the same school where he studied because she intended to study there for a while. Minu was startled by his friend's appearance when he saw his bruised face, so much so that he asked if he had been in an accident. Annoyed and with few words, he simply replied that he had had an accident. Minu asked how he managed to get hurt every single day and where he had left the bike. He replied that he had left it at the repair shop. That's when his friend noticed the bike had also sustained some damage. He felt sad, realizing that his friend wouldn't be able to ride with him for a while. Frustrated, he understood he would have to go to school alone the next day. Meanwhile, Jay's younger brother slept peacefully on the living room carpet, next to his friend Jack. The next day, at school, everyone surrounded him, asking if he had been badly hurt in the accident. Dam Kong, who already considered himself a friend of Jay, asked if he was feeling okay since everyone had been worried about him at the cafe the previous day. He made it clear that Minu, in particular, had been very concerned. Standing nearby and hearing his words, Minu quickly placed her hand over his mouth, stopping him from saying more. Yuna wanted him to be straightforward and explain what had happened on the way to the cafe. The boy, who didn't like being bothered, replied that it was nothing serious and that they could forget it, and returned to studying. The teacher arrived and asked everyone to sit down because he had an announcement to make. He asked for everyone's attention, requesting silence to hear what he had to say. He announced that, from that moment, there would be a new exchange student at their school. He told the girl to come in and not be shy, as everyone was waiting for her. That's when the blonde, with confident steps, entered the classroom. Everyone fell silent, admiring the unmatched beauty of the girl. The teacher explained that she was from England and had been transferred to their school. He mentioned that she would only be in Korea for one semester, and asked everyone to help and be friendly with her. He asked her to give a brief introduction. She said her name was Shelley and that she enjoyed traveling and cycling. The class went wild, believing an angel had fallen into their classroom. Yuna, on the other hand, was surprised by her classmates' pathetic behavior. She still felt unsettled by the boy's actions. Dam Kong thought the girl was beautiful but didn't find her as attractive as Yuna. However, Yuna's target was not the slightest bit interested in the criticisms, compliments, or comments. Instead, she found the source of all the commotion. She noticed the director crouch down, observing the classroom to ensure his granddaughter would integrate well with the group. He realized that this room was full of wolves, all with their eyes on his little Shelley. The director was interrupted by the janitor, who noticed he was spying. In the classroom, the teacher looked for the best place to seat her. Showing her confidence, Shelley said she would find a place to sit on her own. Avoiding her target, she identified the perfect spot and walked past him. Realizing he hadn't even noticed her, she kissed him on the cheek, leaving everyone stunned. Mia, in turn, was shocked and saddened, while the boys were impressed that the girl had just arrived and already kissed someone. The director was furious about his granddaughter's behavior and thought the boy shouldn't dare kiss her back. The janitor had to intervene and take the director elsewhere, as his behavior was inappropriate. The teacher also reprimanded this strange behavior in the school. Jay, startled by the girl's kiss, wiped his face and asked what she was doing. She explained that she hadn't had the chance to thank him when he retrieved her bag from the Imaginext line. She handed him his wallet, which he had dropped, and said she had kept it safe for him. Looking firmly at the boy next to him, she said she wanted to sit there and asked if he would mind pointing out the seat. The boy, feeling intimidated, replied that he didn't mind and that it would be rude not to offer her a seat. Yuna realized he had missed the previous day's meeting because of that girl. Mia was upset, feeling that the kiss in front of the whole class was unnecessary. June was looking at the race flyer when Minu rushed past him. He wanted to know where Minu was going in such a hurry. Minu replied that they'd talk later because he had just learned that a new exchange student was in the class. June wanted to share something important with his friend, but Minu didn't even listen. Everyone was talking about how that nerd had kissed a blonde angel. However, June wanted to tell him about the race flyer but decided to let it go for now. He'd share later that, apparently, the boy was entering the tournament they both loved. Minu arrived breathless at the classroom, looking for the nerd who had kissed the blonde angel. However, his desk was already surrounded by boys asking where he had met such a beautiful girl and how they knew each other. The girls were looking at Shelly and commenting on her hair, asking how she knew Jay. Shelly, glancing in Jay's direction, saw Minu waving at her and saying he was from class 3. She replied that this was what she meant to say and that it was a pleasure to meet her. Minu then approached Jay, placing a hand on his shoulder, and said he needed to talk to him. Jay, however, replied that Minu should come back later because he was busy. Minu grabbed his arm, insisting he stop lying and just say what he wanted, even if it was just for a minute. Meanwhile, the blonde girl was watching the two of them. Minu then asked Jay how long they had been together, and why he was getting involved with Shelly so quickly. Jay, without hesitation, replied that he wasn't with her. Minu thought he was joking and pressed him to explain what really happened. Jay said that she suddenly appeared and kissed him out of nowhere. Minu found it strange that she had kissed Jay for no reason and asked how he hadn't mentioned her before, especially since they were living together. Everyone around them began jumping to conclusions, thinking Jay had betrayed Minu with the blonde girl. Minu, trying to preserve his masculinity, explained that everyone had misunderstood. As a representative of the school newspaper, one student took a photo to document the moment. Meanwhile, a boy with orange hair walked by and smelled Shelly's blonde hair. She gently slapped his face to keep him away. Mia, who had been watching everything, stood up, almost unable to believe what was happening. She was deeply upset, and the chatter of the students around her wasn't helping. She remembered when she was bullied at school, especially by her friends and classmates. She recalled one specific day when they went too far, throwing her books on the floor and breaking her glasses. She was devastated because her glasses were expensive, and she couldn't go without them. It was then that Jay approached her and asked about her glasses prescription. When she answered, he said they had the same prescription and offered her his spare glasses. He gave her the extra pair he always carried since he frequently broke his glasses, and that's how she met Jay in middle school. She knew he wasn't good at interacting with people and rarely showed his emotions, but he was kinder than anyone else. That was the moment she began to like him. It was very difficult for Mia to express her feelings, especially after all the bullying she had endured since middle school. This had caused her to lose confidence in herself and begin to hate how she dealt with the world. After class ended, Jay was walking out calmly when a voice he was tired of hearing called out to him. It was Minu, calling him a nerd and asking for updates on his teeth while holding up the flyer that June had given him. It was about a race, and Minu mentioned that the prize was 100 million won, which was significant since he currently had no money. Trying to be persuasive, Minu asked him to form a group to participate since he could earn some money. Jay, as firm as ever, said he wasn't interested and asked Minu to stop bothering him. Minu insisted, saying that if they participated, they might even end up on TV and become famous. The blonde girl watched from a distance, observing Jay and Minu talking as Minu tried to persuade him to join. When Shelly was about to shout and asked to go with him, her grandfather appeared. He asked her where she thought she was going. Shelly explained that she wanted to go out with a friend, but her grandfather grabbed her by the hood and said the friend could wait because he wanted to see her first. He questioned what she was plotting and said she should go home with him. Shelly was upset because she wanted to follow Jay, but her grandfather took her away. When Jay got home, he took a shower and was preparing to study when Minu showed up again with the flyer. Minu suggested that if Jay fixed the bike, they could join the race together. However, Jay didn't want to hear about it anymore. The TV was on, airing an interview with an Asian cycling representative. It was Sancho Choi, who would be participating in a cycling festival in the Street League. Minu was already familiar with his fame and knew he was the greatest cyclist in Korea and would be competing. When asked about the competition, Sancho Choi replied that he would race the final stretch with the amateur team that won. Meanwhile, Jay and Kay were arguing over the remote control, while Minu wanted to keep watching the interview. They talked about Mahon Jo, an Asian cycling hero who had passed away 2 years earlier, a victim of an accident after a doping test. Sancho Choi mourned the death of Man Jo, mentioning that if he were still alive, he would have had to end his career due to doping issues. Jay, hearing this, remembered Manjo's kind and gentle face and felt sad upon hearing Sancho's words. He also condemned the use of doping to enhance performance, and hoped other cyclists wouldn't follow the same path. Meanwhile, Minu and Jay were fighting over the remote control until Jay suddenly stood up and announced he would join the competition. His friend was perplexed, thinking he had misheard. Late at night in a square, there were three: Jay, Minu, and June. June asked if he was really joining the team with them. Jay replied that he was, especially after hearing that reporter say things about his uncle. He couldn't just ignore it. Minu asked what had caused him to change his mind so suddenly. Jay remembered the interview and grew angry but wasn't about to tell his friends what was going on. Minu wanted to know if it was because of the prize money or the international competition. But for Jay, nothing was more important than clearing his uncle's name and proving to that man that he didn't use doping. June thought that regardless of the reason, it was good to know Jay would be participating with them. Now they had a situation to resolve. They still didn't have enough members to call it a team. Minu thought the members of his old team might also join and end up facing them. His friend told him to forget about that. It was in the past. Now, they could create their own team. Minu was tasked with coming up with a name for their new team. June agreed, saying they needed a name. He asked what the two had in mind. Jay remained silent. Minu seemed to be thinking. That's when Minu had the brilliant idea of naming the team Super Cool, but June thought it was too childish. Then they considered Super Other Team, Giant Team, maybe Tiger Team, or even Legendary Team. June thought the discussion wasn't going anywhere, so they decided to resolve it the next day. Jay thought the devil must be on the same team as that clueless guy. Minu really wanted the team to be called Super Cool because he thought it was an awesome name. In the classroom the next day, the English lesson continued. Meanwhile, Minu was struggling to come up with a good name for their team. He was finding it incredibly difficult, something he had never experienced before. During the break, the three of them gathered to brainstorm names, and Minu showed the draft he had made the night before. He declared that there was no alternative but to go with Team Super Cool. Jay, losing patience, said he wouldn't accept such a dumb name. Minu asked what name Jay suggested. He replied, anything but Super Cool. Minu was outraged because he thought it was a great name, and Jay wasn't even trying to come up with something else. At that moment, the blonde girl appeared behind Jay, who, still indifferent to her, continued to ignore her presence. When she heard about the bike team, she got interested and wanted to join. Thinking it was a super cool idea, June politely told her that the competition could be dangerous for a girl. Minu immediately welcomed her, saying that of course she could join because she was a beautiful girl and always welcome. He added that all she needed to know was how to ride a bike. He would handle the rest. Annoyed, she said she could ride very well. Mia had been very upset since she saw the new girl in class exchange kisses with Jay. Yuna, her friend, tried to cheer her up, asking why she had been so down since the other day. Mia tried to hide her feelings, saying she wasn't feeling well. Then Dom Kong butted into the conversation. He said all she needed was some energy, and that listening to good hip-hop would make her feel better. Shelly joined the discussion about the team name, which led Minu to suggest the goddess and her minions. June noticed that his friend got even sillier whenever a girl was around. Dom Kong, overhearing the conversation, asked why they kept going out without him. He was so disappointed. He thought they were friends. He said that after that night in the room, he thought he and Jay would never be apart again. Mia, seeing her beloved surrounded by that girl and her friends, grew even sadder. She stood frozen as the girl integrated into the group, something Mia had always wished she could do. Yuna noticed her friend looking more downcast than usual. Meanwhile, Dom Kong was throwing a fit because he wanted to join the bike team, too. The blonde girl just stared at Minu. Now, the five of them were together, trying to decide on a team name. Minu wanted to know why Dom Kong was still hanging around. He said he was there because he was also going to be part of the team. He was asked if he even had a bike. That's when he explained he was planning to get a used one from an online site. Minu told him they could talk more after he bought the bike. Since they were from the same school, they thought they could name the team after their school. But the idea wasn't accepted. It seemed a bit silly. Shelly said they were terrible at choosing names. While her grandfather kept an eye on what she was doing with the four boys, Minu hadn't given up on naming the group Super Cool. Her grandfather, the school principal, was annoyed because little Shelly was hanging around boys again. But seeing her smile, he realized it had been a long time since he'd seen her that happy. As he sipped his juice, a hummingbird flew near Dom Kong. The little hummingbird was bothering both him and Minu, who thought it was an insect. Someone suggested it might be a hummingbird. June explained that there were no hummingbirds in Korea. He said it might be a hawk moth, as many people confuse them because they look similar. He mentioned that the hummingbird flaps its wings faster than any other bird, at least 90 times per second, and is excellent at acrobatics. Minu thought flapping wings 90 times per second was incredible as he argued with him not to take his smoothie. That's when he wondered, how fast could someone pedal a bike 90 times per second? Probably faster than a motorcycle. He imagined himself pedaling as fast as a hummingbird. That's when he caught the attention of June, Jay, and Shelly. Dom Kong wanted to know what a hummingbird had to do with the situation. Meanwhile, the poster advertising the race was circulating in various places and catching the attention of many people. Among them, several notable personalities were interested in participating in the race. Others, simply deluded, thought they could win with the bike called Senechan. The news also reached TJ, who found it all very interesting. Staying behind in the classroom, Mia and Jay were erasing what was left on the board. That's when she asked him if he was really dating the exchange student. He didn't like the question and asked her what she was talking about. Mia, a bit embarrassed, said it was what everyone at school was saying, that they were dating, and she was just curious. He replied that they weren't dating and asked who was spreading such nonsense. She said knowing that was a relief, as it seemed they were forming a team or something similar. He explained it was a cycling team. She thought it was cool and sounded fun, asking what the team's name was. He said they decided to call it Hummingbird. She thought the name was adorable. She asked if they had already designed a logo or emblem. If not, she could make one for them. She explained that she wanted to become a designer after graduation, so if she liked it, she could create something for them. He told her that if she wanted to try, she could make something for him. Smiling and blushing, she said it would be great. He told her to finish quickly because he wanted to leave. Later, she told him she planned to buy a bike soon and asked if he could teach her to ride when he had free time. Jay said he would teach her when he had some free time. She was delighted with his response. After leaving school, he went straight to the bike shop to pick up the bike he had left for repair. Harry told him he was later than she had expected. At Dom Kang's house, he announced his arrival. His father called him over to have a drink with the old man. Dom Kang replied that he was tired and had to work soon. His father said he could at least act a little happy to see him, or he would feel sad. He asked if he was dating multiple girls at school. The boy said of course not. His father said that when he was the same age, he wasn't as serious as Dom Kang and always knew how to enjoy life. One of his men asked him to stop bothering the boy and return to eating. That's when Dom Kang asked his father to buy him a bike so he could exercise. His father found it strange that he suddenly wanted a bike. Then he asked how much bikes cost these days. One of the men replied that at least 50,000 won would get a decent one, and he would give that much. He handed the money to his son and told him to buy a decent bike. Hearing the amount, the boy thought his father was joking. Where would he find a bike that cheap? He thought it was ridiculous and didn't know what he would do to buy a bike for 50,000 won. He found a new bicycle on a website for 100,000 won. He thought it was suspicious that there were no pictures, but he figured he should buy it for himself. One of the henchmen suggested he send a message to the seller. Shy, Dom Kang thought about asking for a discount and requesting half the price. Then he wondered if this could be a scam. The henchman said no one would try such a blatant scam, but if the seller ran off with the money, he would take care of it. However, the seller quickly replied to the message, agreeing to the 50,000 won discount. Now Dom Kang felt very lucky. He could join the team. On the other side, the seller assumed he was dealing with a middle or high school student, given the lack of money. At least the scammer had already pocketed the cash from the fool who had just sent it. The scammer was also confident the kid wouldn't report it to the police over something trivial like a bike. Meanwhile, the girl at the bike shop was pleased that Jay had decided to join the competition with those boys. She said it was great, and hoped they would create good memories together. She advised him to take good care of the bike since the chain was a mess, given that his uncle had handed it down to him. She reminded him to keep it in good condition. She shared that it had taken a while to gather all the individual parts, and that the 7 front wheels he had used before had been destroyed. She explained that the carbon wheels were lighter than regular ones, which would make the bike lighter. However, she warned that if the carbon wheel cracked, it could completely ruin the wheel, so he shouldn't ride recklessly. She emphasized that it wasn't indestructible just because it was made of carbon. He asked how much the parts and repairs would cost. She replied that those 7 wheels had been pulled from a dusty corner, so he could keep them. As for the repairs, he could pay her after winning the competition. She hoped they would secure first place, especially for his uncle's sake after the doping incident. With that, she made it clear she knew this was his reason for wanting to participate. Meanwhile, Vinny's friend told him to stop living like a pig. He pointed out that school was already over. It was nighttime, and he shouldn't be sleeping all day. Opening one eye, Vinny asked what time it was. His friend told him it was already 8 p.m. and that since he wasn't dead, he should get up and do something. Since Vinny hadn't gone to school or answered his phone, the friend had come over, worried, only to find him sleeping. He told Vinny he had a note from his mother, who had apparently stopped by in the morning. She left a note and some money. It was 10,000 won, and Vinny wondered what to do with it. As soon as he bought cigarettes or something to eat, it would be gone. His friend also told him that the teacher had said if he skipped more classes, he would be expelled. Vinny was upset that he had to attend class the next day or face expulsion, but he felt like giving up. When Vinny arrived at school, he was poorly received by the staff member in charge of student entry. This man was not known for being kind to students. His teaching method was so harsh that it made students even less inclined to attend school. He called the students rebels and said it was because of people like Vinny that the school was in such a state. He made it clear that if Vinny made another mistake, he would be expelled. Then, muttering about Vinny's ridiculous hair color and treating him as an aberration, he added that he didn't even know how Vinny ended up at the school. He believed Vinny wouldn't graduate and thought the school was just wasting time on someone like him. He even mentioned that he would prefer to expel Vinny right then, but Vinny's best friend arrived and stood in front of the man. With the presence of a respectable student, the conversation immediately changed tone. The friend simply stared at the man, who was beside himself with anger at the students, and walked past him as if nothing had happened. Approaching his friend, he asked if Vinny was okay. Vinny didn't look pleased. Everyone knew not to meet his gaze or speak ill of him behind his back, as the consequences could be severe. He had acted this way since he was young to protect himself. Reaching the door, he said he wanted to speak with the idiot at the window who was staring at him. He told the guy to come to him willingly while he was still being nice. The boy at the window apologized, saying he had only looked by accident and didn't mean any harm. However, Vinny grabbed a chair and seemed ready to discipline the boy. Vinny didn't care if the guy was sorry or not. He needed to discipline him so others wouldn't dare do the same to him. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the boys were still gawking at the beautiful blonde exchange student. She was on the phone, asking her father to send her bike because she wanted to ride it, and she asked him to send it by mail. While she was happily talking to her father on the phone, Dom Kong was having a hard time with his own call. He was trying to reach the guy who had sold him the bike, but now he wasn't answering. No matter how many times he called, he couldn't get a response. He thought the guy was ignoring his calls and messages. Yuna, watching him, noticed he was glued to his phone and now had a very serious expression. Meanwhile, Mia wasn't paying much attention to her friend because she was sketching a hummingbird. Her friend asked what she had been drawing all that time. Mia explained she was working hard on a design. Yuna wanted to know if it was some kind of logo. Mia replied that yes, it was, and it would be of a hummingbird. Yuna mentioned that her brother and Jay had quickly finished their snack and gone outside. She asked Mia if she knew where they had gone. Mia said she wasn't sure but overheard them talking about submitting an application for a competition. She didn't know her brother was trying to join a competition. She thought that now that they were living together, he would improve. Mia was beaming, feeling like she had completed the perfect sketch. All that was left was to show it to the boys and see what they thought. Meanwhile, the boys left the post office after sending in the application form. Jay asked if it had really been necessary for him to come along just to send the form. Mina said that since they were on the same team, they had to stick together. He asked if Jay would rather relax at school while he did all the hard work alone. Jay then told Minu to drop it and hurry up because they were wasting time. Minu, feeling hungry, said that before they left, he wanted to grab something to eat. Jay told him he wasn't in the mood and would eat something on his own later. Minu noticed there was no middle ground with Jay. He was always so rude. Across the street, Minu saw someone with a completely floral, pink bike and thought it looked unusual. The man called his bike Sena-chan and asked her to wait a bit while he submitted his competition application. He thought the bike might be stolen, so he put a lock on it to ensure no one would take his beloved bike. After showering the bike with kisses, he said he'd be back quickly. Just looking at him gave Minu chills. He thought the guy was way too eccentric. He left him there because they needed to get back quickly. They were only on a class break. However, the man didn't appreciate hearing Minu call his bike stupid. Minu asked if the man was talking to him. The guy said yes and demanded to know why he had insulted his bike with such a mean name. The man called Minu a worthless human and said he couldn't use just any name for his super bike. The two boys found the man's behavior very strange. They figured he must be some kind of otaku or something. Furious, the man yelled at Minu to take back what he said about his bike. He was so angry that he grabbed Minu by the collar, spitting as he shouted. He rambled on, using strange names only otakus would understand. Minu looked to his friend for help, but Jay told him to just apologize and leave. Seeing that his friend wasn't going to help, Minu said he took it back and only said it because the bike was very pretty. The cyclist told him not to look at her like that again because he was just a little useless. The man then bent down and grabbed his competition application form, pointing out that his team's name was Manga Team. Minu realized that the otaku was also going to participate in the street league. The guy added that they could call her Sena-chan because that was her name. Like her owner, the bike was also very exotic and had a unique name. The two boys couldn't understand how someone so strange could exist. They pedaled quickly back to school since they were only on their break. On the way, they kept thinking about how bizarre that otaku was. Jay commented that the bike was probably his girlfriend, which was why Minu made him so angry. Minu, looking at Jay, couldn't tell if he was serious or joking, as Jay never showed any reaction. The man passed them and called the two of them slow schoolboys. He said he hoped they would enjoy the view of the back of his bike because it was very charming. Minu didn't know who this person was or why he was so full of himself riding an ordinary bike. To solve Dom Kang's problems, he called his father's henchman and explained that he had been scammed. That couldn't stand. They were a respected gang and couldn't face such embarrassment, especially since he had suggested buying online. He told Dom Kong to finish his class peacefully, assuring him he would handle everything. He then summoned another henchman, saying someone had stolen money from their young master. Using the phone number and bank account, they would track down the scammer. He instructed the henchman to pass the information to a hacker to locate the swindler. The other henchman said that finding the guy's location would be easy for the hackers who had recently breached one of Korea's biggest credit card companies. He ordered that once they had a location, they should bring a few more men and some tools. He wanted to scare the scammer. Dom Kong was deeply upset, feeling he should never have fallen for an internet scam. He just hoped he could find the guy and confront him face to face. As he thought about this, his face darkened, and someone placed a hand on his shoulder. He turned with an angry expression, scaring a classmate who had only come to talk to him, saying Yuna wanted to speak with him. Though still upset and wondering what she wanted, seeing her always put him in a good mood. Even if he wanted to stay serious, he couldn't when he saw her eyes. So he ran to find out what she wanted. Approaching her, he asked how he could help. She wanted to know why he seemed so gloomy that day. She gave him a piece of gum to calm him down, telling him to stop stressing and have some sugar to lift his spirits. To him, that gum was more than incredible. It felt like a gift from the goddess Yuna. He told her he felt terrible because she wouldn't give him a little kiss. Annoyed by his comment, she gently caressed his face before punching him. Meanwhile, someone else was happily riding a bicycle, wearing a helmet, and snacking on treats they had bought, with money scammed from a fool who fell for the classic new and cheap bike trick. Now, the scammer was enjoying a feast bought with the 50,000 won sent by the gullible buyer. Heading back to his hideout, he felt ecstatic about his purchases. He planned to sneak in quietly to avoid the landlord asking for rent. He thought he could slip by unnoticed and avoid paying, but something felt off when he got home. The door had been forced open, and his apartment invaded. He thought he might have been robbed and rushed inside. However, once inside, there were several men in black suits holding various tools, and none of them looked friendly. After all, he was just a student and cyclist. He didn't understand why they were welcoming him with such intensity. Trembling, he dropped his bag of food on the floor and asked who they were and what they wanted. It was nighttime, and after the scammer had arrived home to find several people there, they all demanded explanations for why he had tricked their young master. Now, the scammer was immobilized in a chair, unable to speak, still wearing his cycling helmet. One of Dom King's father's henchmen was furious with the scammer, pointing out he had swindled the wrong person. The henchman told the scammer that if he wanted to con someone, he should be ready to face all consequences. The father's bodyguard expressed his dissatisfaction at having to go to such a place and waste his time. He warned the scammer that, even tied to the chair, he would witness the arrival of their young master, and things wouldn't be cheap. After all, the scammer had effectively bought himself a one-way ticket with that 50,000 won scam. While everyone surrounded the seated scammer, their young master, Dom Kong, arrived, greeted with respect by all. When Dom Kong walked in, his face was furious. He had spent the entire day trying to track down the guy who had scammed him. The scammer, sitting in the chair, looked at the young man in front of him, thinking he was just a schoolboy. He couldn't understand why everyone obeyed him without question. He started trembling even more when Dom Kong, with his hands in his pockets, began to fidget as if reaching for something. However, he was only retrieving his prized treasure, something he had nurtured on a particularly upsetting day. The scammer cyclist was sitting in the chair, waiting for the words to come out of that pocket, already in tears. He was puzzled by the change in the young man's demeanor when he pulled out nothing more than a caramel candy, which made the previously serious guy look amazed. The scammer was so caught off guard by this that he even stopped crying. One of the men asked what they should do with the scammer, but he just kept chewing because the candy, given to him by Yuna, tasted amazing. Regaining his serious expression, he looked at the man sitting there and asked where the bike he had sold him was. One of the several henchmen in the room pointed to the bike, and he saw it was almost brand new. Approaching the bike, he spoke to it, saying he didn't know what was happening but was very pleased because it was in excellent condition and had only cost him 50,000 won. At that moment, the real owner of the bike, if he weren't immobilized and unable to speak, would have surely said something. His agony at seeing someone else approach his bike was evident. Dom King's father's bodyguard thought something good must have happened that day because he was in such a good mood. Dom Kong, satisfied with getting the bike at such a low price, commented to the scammer that since he said he wouldn't ride anymore, he didn't need the helmet. Delighted with the bike and helmet, he said he'd taken the bike, so the guy could leave now. The bodyguard felt slightly disappointed with his young boss. Meanwhile, the scammer cyclist was crying, but now it was certainly not out of fear but sadness for losing his bike. The leader of the henchmen told the guy he was very lucky and ordered his men to release him. After some time, the man was found in a soft patch of dirt, where he had been planted upright. He wasn't alone, as a few cats surrounded him, wanting to play. Elsewhere, now at Jay's house, Minu wanted to use the computer for a bit, but Jay refused because he wanted to attend an online class. That's when Minu heard some noises coming from the window. He asked if Jay had also heard the noise outside. Congested from a cold, Jay replied that it was probably just a cat or something similar. Not satisfied with the answer, Minu opened the window to check outside. He found Dom Kong, who was extremely happy with his bike, showing it off like a trophy. Minu was also thrilled for his friend's new acquisition, and when it came to bikes, of course, Jay was interested. He quickly went to the window to see what was going on. Within minutes, the three of them were outside Jay's house, looking at the bike. Minu took the opportunity to test it out. However, as he rode the bike, he felt like he had seen it somewhere on the street before but couldn't recall where. Looking at Dom Kong, he asked if the bike had been expensive and how much he had paid for it. Pleased with himself, Dom Kong said he had bargained it down to just 50,000 won on a used goods site. Seeing the reactions of the two, who seemed unable to believe his words, he asked if he had paid too much. They looked at the bike again and realized it was in excellent condition. They asked what he had done to the bike's owner to get such a low price. Dom Kong simply repeated the excuse the scammer had given him, that he wasn't going to use it anymore, so he sold it cheap. Jay intended to leave the two outside and go back inside to study more, as his grades had dropped significantly. Now with the bike, Dom Kong didn't know how to ride it, so he asked his friends for advice. Minu suggested he practice skidding, as it would make it easier to ride a single-gear bike. But judging by his friend's expression, he figured Dom Kong had never heard of skidding before. Feeling excited, Minu tried to explain that it was a trick for single-gear bikes where you stop the rear wheel using leg strength. Seeing that even his explanation didn't help, Minu decided to demonstrate, saying Dom Kong just needed to watch and repeat. Quickly, Minu performed the trick so Dom Kong could understand. Feeling confident, Dom Kong thought he had understood just by watching and decided to give it a try. At first, he couldn't position his feet properly. One friend commented that this wasn't suited for him. Still, he kept trying, determined to figure out a way to get it right. After spending a few minutes trying to fit his foot in place to at least attempt pedaling, he set off awkwardly. A few pedal strokes in, and he was already exhausted. Then he had the brilliant idea of going downhill on a bike without brakes. Minu asked him to try skidding like he had demonstrated earlier. Dom Kong noticed he was almost losing control to the bike. There was no way he could let that happen. He tried pedaling in the opposite direction. He yelled that it wasn't working at all. To him, the pedals were spinning too fast for him to stop. He went downhill screaming that he couldn't stop. Now his legs were pedaling on their own. After the accident, Minu realized his friend wasn't very athletically skilled. He thought it would be better if they all went to a shop the next day to fix their friend's bike brakes. Another school day at Sunny High, where students prepared for yet another intense study session. The girls grouped together, complaining about their appearances and trying to apply makeup to conceal imperfections. Meanwhile, some students embraced a more adventurous lifestyle and spent their time skateboarding around campus. In one group of girls, they talked about how they wished Minu would someday notice their feelings. As a skateboarder sped past the girls, the wind caused their skirts to lift slightly. The boy, moving at high speed, felt smug, having caught a glimpse of two pieces of underwear, one pink and one white. However, the group of three girls was far from pleased with his antics. They grew even angrier upon realizing the wind lifting their skirts wasn't an accident. The orange-haired boys were intentionally trying to peek at the girls' underwear. This brought him great satisfaction. He observed that most of the girls wore white underwear, which he thought seemed to be a trend. Then he spotted the girl he was most interested in, Shay, the blonde exchange student. She was in the group, interacting and being as friendly as only she could be. This sparked an immense interest in the orange-haired boy for the blonde girl. Performing radical skateboarding tricks, he seemed unusually fired up. The orange-haired skateboarder adjusted his hair, as it was his most prized feature, always drawing attention. Feeling confident as ever, he decided it was time to approach his target, the girl who brought him so much joy. Unfortunately, he couldn't, as he was cornered by some girls who weren't too happy about his skateboarding stunts. They were even more annoyed after realizing the wind lifting their skirts wasn't accidental. One of the girls decided to caress his stomach with light punches. The others, cheerfully, decided to stomp on the boy a bit so he could feel loved. Meanwhile, others in the group surrounding Michelle were admiring the logo Mia had designed. She had been tasked with creating the logo to impress Jay. Lifting her notebook, she showed it to everyone and asked what they thought. Minu, as always, the gentleman, took Mia's hands and said the logo was beautiful. He declared that now the team could win thanks to it. Yuna, knowing her brother well, told him to stop using that as an excuse to hold Mia's hands. Minu was upset because the way she put it made him seem strange. Shay, stepping closer to get a better look at Mia's logo, said she drew very well and asked to see it up close. Mia, still holding a grudge against Shay for kissing Jay, refused to let her take a closer look at the logo. Noticing Mia's indifference and lack of cooperation, Shay asked what her problem was with her. The atmosphere grew so tense that even the usually oblivious Minu, who rarely noticed anything, realized the girls were at odds. However, he was delighted because they now had the perfect logo for the team. That heated exchange shifted the mood slightly. Minu asked Jay if he liked the logo too, since he hadn't shown any reaction. In a calm and cold tone, without even looking at the drawing, Jay simply said yes. Mia felt satisfied and expressed her happiness to Jay, saying she was glad he liked it since she had made the logo specifically for him. From a distance, Yuna saw Dom Khan stumbling and disoriented. She couldn't figure out what he had gotten himself into this time. He struggled to walk, holding onto the classroom furniture to reach his team. Everyone noticed how difficult it was for him to move and wanted to know if he had been in a fight or if someone had hurt him. Trying to appear cheerful but visibly drained, Dom Khan explained that he had been practicing skidding late into the night the day before. Now, he was determined to buy brakes after class because he was scared of riding the bike, which seemed dangerous without them. Minu, concerned about the bike's safety, asked where he had left it and if he remembered to lock it. The sore but smiling Dom Khan reassured him not to worry, saying the bike would never be stolen. Outside the school, in the corridor, Dom Kang's bike was tied to a Rottweiler, which was attracting a lot of attention from passers-by. Everyone who passed by admired the bike, noting how its dynamics and color matched beautifully. However, whenever someone tried to approach, they were met with a massive Rottweiler, ready to defend it. Just looking at the dog, people grew fearful, wondering who had the idea to tie a Rottweiler to a bike. In the classroom, Dom Khan was the cause of the commotion and the mastermind behind tying the Rottweiler to guard his bike. His behavior unsettled Jay, who, despite knowing him well, couldn't understand him. Even on days when Dom Khan showed no visible reaction, he couldn't hide his emotions in such bizarre situations. Mia, on the other hand, didn't care about Dom Kang's bike or the dog tied to it. She asked Jay if he had time over the weekend to teach her how to ride a bike. Her friend Yuna, wanting to ensure Jay couldn't back out, told him that Mia had worked hard researching to create the team logo. Thus, as a thank you, he should teach her how to ride a bike that weekend. Indifferently, Jay simply said he would keep his word. Mia was delighted to hear that Jay would teach her to ride a bike that weekend. However, the blonde exchange student told Mia that she could stop right there because she couldn't borrow Jay. Mia wanted to know what she meant, saying Shelly couldn't speak for Jay. Shelly didn't care. She already had plans for the weekend and wanted to go out, too. Dom Khan, very excited, announced that he would also join because he wanted to practice. Minu, not wanting to leave Jay alone with the girls, said he would train with them all that weekend. Yuna just watched, thinking the boys were brainless. They didn't even realize Mia was arranging this as an excuse to spend time alone with Jay. Minu looked at June and considered inviting him, but he noticed June was probably busy studying for college entrance exams. However, June was actually glued to his phone, analyzing potential rivals. In the world of competitive sports, staying ahead wasn't just about skills but also knowing your opponents. June noticed one athlete who stood out, riding a 5-speed bike. Currently, this athlete was training in the same city, preparing for the championship in which their team was also competing. The athlete was achieving speeds between 89 km per hour and 92 km per hour. However, his training occasionally pushed him to reach 97 km per hour. Since his training involved downhill courses, he was always followed by a car that filmed him constantly. These training sessions were streamed live so everyone could witness the athlete's prowess. In his most recent session, he reached the incredible speed of 102 km per hour. This result left June very apprehensive, as he had never heard of any athlete achieving such speed. At the bike shop, Dom Khan, not wanting to face further challenges with his bike, brought it in to have brakes installed. Harry finished the maintenance work and added front brakes to give him more safety. Dom Khan was thrilled because he could now ride his bike confidently. Jay was the one who told him about the shop but hadn't realized the girl from the webcast was the manager. Minu asked the beautiful mechanic if she was the same person who did the webcast and also ran the shop. She explained that the live streams were just for fun, and her real job was working at the shop, which her father owned. Harry asked them about the upcoming competition and why they weren't training or exercising. Minu, confident in his friend's perfect execution, declared that with Jay on their team, victory was guaranteed. But someone interrupted, saying that if they didn't take it seriously, they wouldn't even make it past the preliminaries in the race. The person delivering these words was June, who had been observing the competition participants and checking their rankings. The young man's presence caused some unease. Minu wanted to know if his presence there was frequent. June promptly responded that it was, and that, on that specific day, he had come for routine maintenance and to replace a tire. Dom Kong was excited to see several of his friends in the same place. He thought it was basically their little clubhouse. Minu expressed concern about his friends spending time investigating other competitors, especially with entrance exams approaching. Still, he wanted to show them the results of his research on other participants and their abilities. When he played a video of a cyclist easily reaching speeds over 100 km per hour, they were all stunned. In fact, they found it unbelievable that such speeds could be achieved by a cyclist. Harry, the bike shop manager and an expert in the field, explained that achieving such speed on a 5.1 gear was mostly due to the assistance of a car acting as a windbreaker. Under those conditions, any elite cyclist could reach 100 km per hour. She also mentioned that the new Guinness World Record for cycling speed was over 200 km per hour. Minu remarked that there seemed to be no limit to human potential. He asked his friend who that person was. After researching, June reported that he was known as Monster 13. It appeared he had been a well-known American football player in high school. As quarterback wearing number 13, he led his team and was called the Beast of Football for his ability to practically carry the team on his own. One day, however, he got injured during a game and could no longer run as he used to due to persistent knee pain. He quit football and, after giving up his dream of playing in the US, returned to Korea. He spent his days cycling as a way to rehabilitate his knee. For him, repetitive cycling functioned as intensive physical therapy. His love for bikes and cycling transformed him into a true beast on wheels. Now, he had formed the Monster team, which would participate in the competition. He was considered one of the favorites to win. June explained that street cyclists and competitive cyclists used completely different muscles and had different body compositions. He noted that while these athletes' bodies were built for track cycling, allowing them to handle a 5.1 gear with ease, it was absurd to think they could beat Monster 13 by just chatting among friends. Minu, dissatisfied, said there was no way they could do anything in a competition if someone like that was participating. Dom Kong couldn't offer much input since he had just bought his bike. Seeing their disappointment at being physically outmatched, Harry offered them the chance to use training rollers. She invited them to follow her so she could show them the space and explain how the rollers worked. When she brought them to the room designated for rollers and bike training, they were impressed, as they had never seen anything so detailed. She explained that this was where team members occasionally came to train. The rollers were great for practicing pedaling techniques and testing conditions. She mentioned that training there would help them easily identify the best posture and style for each rider. Dom Kong, despite his inexperience, found it fascinating and wanted to be the first to try the new experience. However, the moment he positioned his bike on the roller for training, he struggled immediately. That alone was enough to frustrate him. When he finally managed to start pedaling, it was clear how much effort he was putting into even simple strokes. He wobbled from side to side, and the noise he made was irritating. He felt like he couldn't control it properly. He never imagined that using a bike on a roller could be so complicated, not to mention the sheer strength it required. At one point, Dom Kong asked why it was so hard. The bike was shaking wildly from side to side. The shop manager kindly explained that it was shaking because he was applying too much force to the handlebars and shoulders. He needed to keep them relaxed, and it would become much easier to control. Despite her tips, he still found it challenging. While it sounded simple when she explained it, it wasn't so easy in practice. As he continued complaining, he noticed that next to him, Jay had placed his bike on a roller and was pedaling as if he'd been doing it all his life. Dom Kong asked Jay why he was so good at it. Jay explained that the secret was that he had practiced it many times as a child, alongside his uncle. Minu also chimed in, saying that Jay was good at everything he did. He thought it was terribly unfair. June smiled and said that Jay was so amazing, which was why he was the ace of the team. The mechanic observed that his upper body remained perfectly steady and his pedaling was completely smooth. Jay was in top form. Anyone could step on the pedals, but using all the muscles to pedal naturally required a lot of practice. Just as Jay demonstrated, Harry, watching him, noticed that he truly was the nephew of the great Mahanjo, as he had a natural talent for cycling. The beautiful mechanic informed them she needed to assist another customer but told everyone to feel free to practice on the trainers whenever they could. And once they felt confident pedaling, they should practice on the streets. Dom Kong, after numerous attempts and feeling completely exhausted, was frustrated because it was harder than he had expected. Minu was also tired and drenched in sweat. While he didn't struggle as much as Dom Kong, he too tired out quickly. Watching Jay's ease, Minu thought it was simply a matter of sitting on the bike and pedaling, but he realized there was much more to it. He didn't even know how to perform skidding yet, and still had a lot to learn. Despite being utterly drained, Dom Kong was already thinking about riding his bike the next day to impress Yuna. Minu asked what he saw in his sister, as he himself didn't appreciate her beauty and thought she resembled an ugly cow. Dom Kong didn't take kindly to such insolence, insisting that his beloved looked nothing like a bovine. Minu couldn't understand why only oddballs seemed to like his sister. This truly baffled him. This revelation shook Dom Kang's heart. He had never imagined his beloved could be Minu's sister. Minu found his reaction strange because the two were identical twins, and until now, Dom Kong hadn't noticed. However, Dom Kong became extremely excited and refused to believe it. There had to be another explanation. How could they be siblings when they didn't look alike? Maybe they shared a slight resemblance, but only a little. Minu asked if he really hadn't suspected any connection between him and Yuna until now. Suddenly, Dom Kong started acting strangely. He jumped in front of Minu, who was startled and asked what he wanted. Out of nowhere, Dom Kong stood before him, calling him brother. Minu felt both embarrassed and annoyed by his friend's odd behavior. The situation was so bizarre that even the other two, who were pedaling, stopped to watch. Jay, who never left his studies, stopped pedaling and studying to see what was happening. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Mia, fresh from a shower, was drying her hair and feeling content. Looking at her bike, she remembered that Jay had promised to teach her how to ride. She saw it as a great opportunity for them to bond and hoped she'd manage to ride properly the next day to make him proud. The day Mia had been eagerly awaiting finally arrived. She was at the park, and Jay was finally going to teach her how to ride a bike. On a bench sat Mia and Shelly, both appearing to wait for something. Dom Kong approached them to cheer them up, carrying a bag with some yogurts. He offered them their choice of flavors. One chose strawberry, and the other wanted a traditional flavor. Shelly, rebellious as ever, glanced at the lid and tossed it away without licking it. This annoyed Dom Kong, who would have loved to lick the lid himself. He commented that she shouldn't have thrown it away without licking it first, asking if she didn't know the proper etiquette for eating yogurt. Shelly, in turn, ignored him, refusing to lick the lid. Dom Kong, however, licked his yogurt lid with great enthusiasm. He explained that before tossing the lid, it should be licked like that. Shelly found it disgusting. Dom Kong licked the lid so thoroughly it gleamed, which grossed her out even more. Upset by her reaction, he retorted that this was how everyone ate yogurt. Mia tried to console him, saying that she ate it the same way. Yuna arrived with the boys and noticed there were already people with Mia. Her brother walked past her, as usual, messing up her hair, knowing it irritated her. Jay, ever the gentleman, didn't even notice. Yuna, for her part, paid no attention to Jay either. Minu, playful as always, arrived cracking jokes with the girls waiting for Dom Kong. Mia stood up to wave her hand, hoping Jay would notice. She wanted to be noticed too but didn't get up. Dom Kong, who was both gentlemanly and very playful, stood up, bowed, and greeted the gentleman. He was eager to show Yuna his new cycling skills, and shared that he had spent the entire night practicing just to show her how much he had learned. However, the young woman asked him to stop trying to look cool. As he said he had practiced, she thought it would be better. However, her expectations were zero. Dom Kong needed to impress his beloved lady somehow, so he decided to perform a stunt to earn points with her. Initially, everything was going well. He was going all out, appearing like a master of cycling skills. He demonstrated his unique skid technique, and had already mastered a new way to hurt himself. Lacking luck and skill, he failed to execute the long skid. His lack of ability caused a minor accident, which he could feel in his lower parts. After feeling intense pain while still on the bike, unable to bear it, he quickly dismounted and was now rolling on the ground like a child. Yuna watched him squirming on the ground and said that he had really trained. Now he could put on comedy shows on bicycles. Walking up to him, she told him he shouldn't try so hard to make her laugh. He just needed to keep being himself. That was enough. Mia didn't care about the chaos or trouble around her. Her attention was solely on Jay. So she approached and asked if the seat of her bike wasn't too high, as she was feeling afraid. Seriously, he told her that if it were too low, it would be hard to pedal and worse for her joints. She said she understood and would try to get used to the way he suggested. Mia, trying to be sweet, told Jay not to forget to hold onto the seat behind her so she wouldn't fall. Not wanting to touch her, he told her not to worry because he was holding onto the bike seat and they could now try their first attempt. Minu was watching, enjoying what was happening, and suggested to Shelly that they do something else. The blonde, however, didn't want to. Although annoyed, she preferred to stay there. The insecurity on the bike was constant, and Mia kept asking Jay not to let go even for a moment. Jay told her not to be scared and to try pedaling forward since, so far, he was only pushing and she wasn't putting in any effort at all. He warned the young woman that if she put too much strength in her shoulders, it would be hard for her to balance, so she should keep her upper body relaxed. Mia really didn't know how to ride a bike. She was wobbling constantly, and trying to pedal in a strange way. And several times, when she lost her balance, she threw herself onto Jay. He kept telling her to try positioning her body centrally, and not to be tense, as it made it harder for him to help her. She felt embarrassed for not being able to do it, and, wanting more of his attention, said she would try again. However, with each passing second, Shelly grew more irritated. Jay wasn't paying her any attention. Extremely upset, she said she couldn't take it anymore. Minu was still watching and saw when Shelly approached Mia, asking her to stop flirting with Jay. Minu, although looking straight ahead, wasn't seeing what was actually happening. He was reminiscing about his own childhood, when he and his sister rode their bikes and when he taught his younger sister how to ride. Yuna said their father had bought the bike for him to take care of his sisters, so he couldn't complain. Despite everything, he enjoyed spending time cycling with his sisters, and he remembered one day when he saw a boy riding by on a bike near them. However, the boy didn't pay any attention to any of them. From that day on, Minu worked hard to be as good as the boy who had passed by. Even his little sister was amazed at the cyclist's agility, so much so that the little one had the idea for all of them to try to catch up with the boy on a big bike. Minu loved the idea and told them just to hold on because he was going all out. Those were good memories of when they were all together. These memories made him calm and serene. Meanwhile, Shelly asked Jay if he could teach her to ride because she thought she had forgotten. The boy, sweating and trying to avoid the girls, told her that he had heard her say before that she knew how to ride a bike very well. Mia, upset, said Shelly should stop flirting with Jay and let him get back to teaching her. Since Jay had previously told Mia he would teach her, Shelly didn't want to hold back and asked Mia if she was there to learn how to ride a bike, or to spend the entire day groping the guy. Mia asked when she had ever seen her groping him. She said she only touched him lightly, denied even brushing against him, and asked her to stop making false claims. Minu, seeing his friend's embarrassment, tried to settle the situation and offered to help. He suggested they switch. He would teach Mia while Jay rested with Shelly. Jay sighed when his friend stepped in to help him out of that tricky situation, as he could no longer understand what the girls were saying. Taking advantage of the fact that Jay was now with her, Shelly put her glasses on him to see how they looked. She also wanted to try on his glasses and asked how they looked on her. However, she couldn't wear them for long since they were prescription glasses, and they made her dizzy. Jay didn't like the game, handed her glasses back, and asked her to return his. The girl refused, saying she absolutely wouldn't give them back. From afar, watching the scene that seemed amusing at first, Mia felt disappointed. From a distance, it seemed like Jay was having more fun with Shelly than he did with her. Minu, noticing the girl was upset, asked her if she didn't like her new partner. The shy and saddened girl told him it wasn't about that. However, his sister, who was standing behind them, didn't like the way the conversation was heading. Irritated, Yuna asked her brother why he was teaching Mia instead of Jay. He explained that Jay had said he was tired, so they switched places. Grinding her teeth, the girl warned her brother not to try anything funny with her friend. Catching the boy off guard, Dom Kong suddenly arrived and immediately told the boss he would take care of Yuna so he could have fun. Minu asked him to stop calling him that because it sounded weird. Dom ignored him. His only priority was Minu's sister, so he told Minu to go have fun with Mia. Yuna, upset with him, said it was strange and that he was being disruptive and shouldn't call her brother boss. Showing affection, Dom explained that he called her brother that because he already felt like part of the family. Yuna, again showing her affection for him, lightly grabbed his neck as she prepared to pat his face with a gentle punch. Meanwhile, Mia had to settle for her new cycling instructor. At a certain point, Mia realized she wasn't talented at cycling. This made her cry. Minu tried to explain to her, in a way that wouldn't make her more upset, that cycling wasn't about talent but effort. He explained that she was so afraid of falling that she wasn't moving forward. With her head down and silent, it seemed like she agreed with what her new cycling teacher was saying. He continued, saying it wasn't about talent. She was just being too timid, that was the problem. And if she was that scared, she would never be able to move forward. That could stop her from becoming a cyclist in the future. Mia lowered her eyes, remembering how her classmates used to bully her in school. Mia was constantly teased by her classmates, who made inappropriate jokes. Mia always remained silent, and didn't express her feelings of anger to her friends to avoid making them uncomfortable. Just the memories of that time made the girl even sadder. Minu encouraged her to keep trying, saying that if she gave up so easily, fear could take over later. Placing his hand on her helmet, he told her not to be afraid of falling. Whatever she did, she should always have confidence. Everything was scary the first time, but after achieving it, it wasn't a big deal anymore. His words gave her some comfort, and she wished to be brave enough to keep trying. She was determined not to let the fear of falling stop her from becoming a cyclist and riding alongside Jay. Minu was happy that the girl was determined and willing to try again. He wouldn't stop teaching her. Holding the bike while she tried to balance herself, the boy was always there to support her. With words of encouragement, he kept telling Mia that she was almost there. If she put in just a little more effort, she would see good results. Minu asked Mia not to look down, to keep looking ahead, and to pedal with confidence. The girl, now free from distractions and focused on her goal, was making progress. Despite her fear taking over, she could feel reassured knowing Minu was there to support her. He, satisfied, believed she had already gotten the hang of it. However, he told her not to stop and to keep pedaling. She agreed to continue but asked him to hold her a little longer. However, when she said those words and looked back, As there was no response, she noticed that he was already some distance away. Encouraging her to keep going, her hard work was being rewarded with everyone admiring her. Yuna was happy because her friend was succeeding. Dom Khan noticed that she was doing everything on her own. Shelley, with a hint of envy, didn't understand what was so great about knowing how to ride a bike. Everyone knew how to do it. The look of disdain and disapproval that Jay gave her was devastating. Although he didn't say anything, he didn't need to. On the other hand, Minu was proud of the good job he had done. She was succeeding because he was an excellent teacher. The girl seemed to have really gotten the hang of it. She could already ride without needing someone to hold her. This made her very satisfied. It was progress she had achieved on her own. When she arrived with her bike back to the group, Minu told her that now she knew how to ride a bike, and that it wasn't so hard for her to get the hang of it. Now that Mia knew how to ride, they could all go for a ride together. The girl was very pleased with his recognition for doing a good job and being patient in teaching her. Jay once again looked at the two having fun and reprimanded them with just a glance. With an even more disapproving look, he told them they seemed quite comfortable and that he was leaving. Minu didn't understand his friend's attitude. That reaction was quite sudden. That behavior caused the whole group to disperse, with everyone going their separate ways. However, Minu's intention was for them all to stay together and enjoy a bike ride. Mia was also saddened because now that she had learned to ride and could join them, Jay was the first to want to leave. Yuna said it was a shame, but since everyone was leaving, she thought they should go too. Mia, satisfied with the progress she had made, said it had been fun, but she also needed to go. Yuna looked to the side and noticed that Dom Kong hadn't said anything, so she asked if he wasn't leaving. He said he would walk her home. She thanked him and said she would take a taxi. Then he said he would accompany her until she got a taxi. She walked ahead, and he followed behind, keeping watch. At a certain point along the way, he was very tired and asked her to keep an eye on the bike because he was going into a convenience store to get something to drink. He said he'd grab something and asked if she wanted anything. She just wanted him to stop following her, as it was very annoying. Some boys were passing by, upset about having missed something. One of them just wanted to head home peacefully. One of them said he'd be back soon. He was just going to the convenience store, leaving the other three behind. They were annoyed because their school was the only one in the area that made them study even on weekends. While they were waiting for their friend to return, another noticed Yuna standing alone across the street holding a bike. He commented to his friends that the girl wasn't bad looking. A friend asked if he was going to try asking her out. Smiling, he said to just wait, as he was going to cross the street and talk to her. Yuna was upset, fiddling with her phone and wondering why he was taking so long since he was only at the convenience store, when someone approached her, calling for her attention. When she looked, the guy was saying she was pretty in his eyes and wanted her to give him her number. Yuna simply pretended the guy didn't exist, completely ignoring him. The guy, seemingly oblivious, kept insisting she give him her number and add him online. This time, she became a bit more annoyed. Looking at him, she told him she had already said she wasn't interested and for him to stop bothering her. He, however, didn't like being rejected by her at all. The friends across the street noticed when the girl asked him to stop bothering her. Amused, they decided to take photos of the moment. The guy, angry, yelled at her to repeat what she had just said. He told her there was nothing wrong with asking for a girl's number. He told her to stop pretending to be so perfect, as she was just a vulgar girl. Very irritated, he continued hurling inappropriate insults and called her several offensive names. However, the scene didn't end that way. The guy was quickly put in his place as someone arrived to teach him a lesson. The lesson was so well delivered that the friends across the street stood frozen as if hypnotized. And the guy from before, who was a bully and offended the girl simply because she didn't want to give him her phone number, had now learned his lesson. Dom Kong was the one who had delivered the disciplinary lesson to the guy to make him understand that he shouldn't treat people that way. Taking off his cap, Dom revealed a very furious expression and made it clear that he didn't tolerate anyone approaching Yuna disrespectfully. The bully from earlier was now knocked out on the ground after learning the hard lesson. The friends on the other side, not fully understanding what had happened, were already upset because they thought it was all that girl's fault. Yuna also noticed their stares and started trembling, as she knew the situation wasn't going to end well. Especially because Dom Kong didn't seem to be in a good mood and wouldn't hesitate to discipline the other two as well. One of the guys on the other side stared at Dom, thinking he should be scared since there were two of them. Dom Kong moved so quickly that they didn't even realize when he was already educating him. The guy had to be taught a lesson. He needed to respect women. And for that, Dom Kong was there, ensuring such behavior wouldn't go unpunished and teaching the guy a lesson. Little by little, the guy seemed to understand that he shouldn't bother girls who didn't want to talk to them. Dom was a specialist in disciplining people who didn't respect his dear Yuna. She, on the other hand, was yelling at him to stop because she didn't want him to get into trouble. Still, Dom continued teaching the guy a bit more because his manners were completely unacceptable. Then he looked at the next one, since there were three of them and he had only disciplined two. The third one, trembling and sweating, knew the lesson might soon be his turn. That's when Yuna pleaded again for him to stop. She was terrified they might get into more trouble. But Dom couldn't stop himself. The disrespect toward a woman alone was too much for him to let it go. He continued giving a moral lesson to the third guy, who gradually began to understand that he should respect others. Then the fourth guy arrived, as he had gone to a convenience store to get snacks for everyone. He could hardly believe that his 3 friends had already been disciplined. He figured they must have done something wrong. Scared he might also be disciplined because of them, he dropped his shopping bag and ran away. Yuna and Dom Kong were walking back in silence. She was still angry because he had fought, and he was upset because he couldn't stop himself. At one point, she said she would take a taxi home from there. He asked if she was upset just because he had resolved the situation earlier. She said yes, that she had already asked him not to go around disciplining people. Dom asked if she expected him to just stand by and watch the guy being disrespectful. She replied that he didn't need to act so abruptly in the lessons he gave people. Frustrated, he asked if she really thought he should have done nothing, if she preferred he just stood there and watched. That's when she fell silent for a moment. She knew she was wrong but didn't want him to intervene in her matters. It was then that Dom Kong told her that, for a girl who grew up with a princess, she probably thought he was like everyone else. Walking away from her, he said he genuinely hoped she got home safely. The guy from the convenience store, who had run away and left the shopping bag behind, was on the phone. He seemed to be calling reinforcements, explaining what had happened to his 3 friends. The trouble had been set in motion, as he was telling a close friend about the incident. However, they were friends of Vinny, who was known for being a troublemaker and instigator of conflicts. The guy on the phone said he understood and that they would take action. This was Vinny's best friend, and he was informing Vinny about the situation where some guys were bothering his friends. Vinny didn't like the news at all, put out his cigarette, and decided to check out the situation himself. The guy who had made the call quickly returned to his 3 friends, who were sitting on a bench. All of them seemed upset and sad after being disciplined. They even thought it was a bit unfair to have been caught in a disciplinary act. The only one among them who hadn't faced any consequences told them they shouldn't have been bothering the girls. He said he was only fine because one of the girls had kicked him, and the guy who had caused all of this called him a coward for running away. He asked why he had called Vinny and sung at a time like that. He said it was embarrassing if everyone found out that the 3 of them had been disciplined by just one person. That's when Vinny arrived, it was embarrassing him to everyone take his found out that the guy was so startled that he fell to the ground on his own. Sitting on the ground, he looked up and realized it was Vinny, whose imposing voice had caused him to fall. Vinny wanted to know where the boy in question was and kept asking the guy on the ground. The boy said that when he woke up, the person had already left. Vinny gave him a lecture, telling him not to go around saying they were from the same school because it was embarrassing. Some concluded that the person who had taught them a lesson was just a student. One of the 3 who had also been put in their place said he wasn't sure. He described someone with long hair and a band-aid under their nose. Besides the long hair and the band-aid, they couldn't remember anything else. However, one of them had something more. At the moment the boy tried flirting with the girl, one of them, thinking it was funny, took a photo, so they had a picture. They assumed the girl with the bike was his girlfriend. The quality of the photo was quite poor, making it difficult to identify anyone. Some wanted to know what they could do with the girl's photo. The boy in the photo, who had been rejected by the girl, was irritated to see someone had taken pictures of him. Vinny, after analyzing the photo and the bike, thought he could make use of it and find out more. He asked Sung to send him the photo because he had an idea of what to do. With the photo now on his phone, Vinny decided to call an old friend. This friend was training on a treadmill with his bike to reach higher speeds. When he heard the phone ring, he immediately said he hated being called while he was training. He momentarily paused his workout, wiped off some sweat, and answered the call. Seeing who it was, he became annoyed. However, Vinny told him to shut up and just look at the photo. He asked for attention, as someone on his team might be using that bike. TJ responded that he had never seen anyone on his team using that kind of trail bike. He then wanted to know why Vinny was sending him the photo. Vinny explained that he was looking for a guy with long hair and a band-aid under his nose. TJ thought about who it might be. After considering the description of the long hair and the band-aid, there was only one possibility. It was the friend of the student council president at Sunny's school, and TJ passed that information to Vinny. Vinny became interested upon learning that the guy in question was from Sunny's school. TJ, after revealing the guy's identity, was very pleased with himself. The boy was a friend of student council president Jay, whom TJ disliked due to past defeats against him. Slowly, TJ's expression changed, and he began laughing maliciously. Looking at the bike, he realized he didn't know what was going on but was relieved that Vinny wasn't after him. The next day at school, Dom Kong entered his classroom and was on his phone. His classmate called him Mr. Tough Guy and invited him to train on rollers with their bikes after school. However, Dom Kong had to decline because he had to work that night. Minu seemed visibly upset, and his friend said he'd train alone later if he could get a break from work. Jay told Minu to stop coming into his classroom. Minu countered, saying the classroom wasn't Jay's, as it belonged to everyone in the school and was meant to be shared. Jay replied that he didn't go into other classrooms because he had no reason to. Their classmates were already gossiping that the two were having another couple's quarrel, fueling rumors they believed to be true. Shay quickly approached Jay and snapped a picture before he noticed. Jay didn't like it and asked what she was doing. She said he was handsome and told him she planned to tell her friends in England that there was a guy she liked. She explained she needed the picture to convince them he was her boyfriend and asked if he was okay with it. He said no. However, she showed him that she had already posted the selfie of the two on her profile. She showed him the picture and said it was a shame because it was already online. Mia was arriving at the classroom, satisfied because she and her friend Yuna had plans to go see a movie the next day. Yuna, upon arriving, stared at Dom Kong, who also didn't look particularly happy to see her. The two girls passed by without saying much to them. Even Dom Kong, who usually seemed pleased when seeing Yuna, wasn't like that this time. Later, to distract himself, he said he was tired and would take a nap, precisely to avoid any questions. Minu noticed that something had happened between the two because either of them was communicating. Mia also noticed and asked if something had happened between her friend and Dom. Yuna was very sad, so Mia asked if the two had fought. The girl, clearly upset, said it was nothing. Looking at him, slumped over the table and napping, she said they weren't close enough to even fight. Outside, the guard dog was keeping watch over his bike. When its owner arrived, the dog became very excited, especially when called by name. Dom Khan had named his dog Jordan and thanked him for being a good bodyguard and watching the bike. He told his dog that he would skip class and go home early. However, as soon as he unleashed the dog, it bolted away. Dom had to grab his bike and chase after it. No matter how loudly he shouted its name, the dog wouldn't stop, drawing the attention of many people. Once the commotion was resolved, Dom tied the dog to his backpack and carried it on his back. Everyone stared at the boy on a bike with a dog that size strapped to his back. Dom Kong told his friend Jordan to please not run away again because it was dangerous, and someone could hurt him. At the end of class, when it was over, everyone was saying their goodbyes. Meanwhile, the three guys from the incident the day before were watching to see if they could spot someone leaving the school. Since they went to a different school, they were waiting outside Sunny to see if they could find the boy. However, the bold one didn't find who he was looking for but noticed from afar the girl he had tried to flirt with the day before. Yuna was walking with her friend Mia. She looked very downcast, as the person who usually cheered her up had left class early. The troublemaker smiled when he saw the girl and reported it to his friends. Meanwhile, Mia was trying to talk to Yuna about Dom. He was acting differently that day. She tried to see if her friend could explain what had happened, and Yuna said it wasn't the first time he skipped class. Yuna told Mia not to worry because he was probably fine. Mia replied that she hoped so. Yuna remained quiet as she walked with Mia until the two were approached by those three guys. One of them asked if she remembered them. Mia, scared, asked her friend who those guys were. Meanwhile, at the WD club where Dom worked, he was using some free time to practice his tricks. His bodyguards were timing him. He was breaking record after record, pulling off amazing tricks in record time. It was clear he was taking cycling seriously. He wanted to impress his friends and join a team. That's why he was working so hard. He was already getting the hang of the standing maneuver, though he still found it very challenging. That's when his phone rang. He found it odd. Who could be calling him at that hour? He took his phone from his pocket to see who it was. It was Mia, and she sounded terrified. Realizing it was Mia, he grew alarmed. She was crying, screaming for him to help her friend. Yuna was being harassed by those boys from the other day, and Mia didn't know what to do. Hearing this, his expression completely changed. Even his bodyguards noticed something was off with him. One of them called out, saying it was time, but was startled when Dom just grabbed his bike, and he sped off at full speed, his face bearing an intense expression. They were pressuring Yuna to give them Dom's phone number. They said there was no point in trying to protect her boyfriend because they would eventually find out where he was. Yuna told them they had issues, first starting trouble and now chasing after the guy. She warned them that if they kept this up, she would call the police because they were being a nuisance. One of the guys sarcastically warned her about what would happen the next day if she really called the police. Mia was already very distressed by the situation and wasn't used to dealing with this kind of thing. Quietly, she told her friend that she had already called Dom and that he was probably on his way. Yuna widened her eyes in shock because she didn't want him to get into trouble, especially when she saw who was there. Vinny was trouble personified. He hardly seemed like a normal person. Wherever he showed up, chaos followed. And judging by his look, he was eager for trouble. He must have orchestrated the whole thing just to confront Dom. And now his friend Mia had handed him over on a silver platter to those bullies. As soon as the bodyguards saw the boy leaving at high speed after answering a suspicious phone call, they didn't think twice about chasing him, but they got stuck at a traffic light. With them was also Jordan, Dom's loyal dog, who still couldn't understand how the boy could be so fast on that bike. In the meantime, the boy's father called to ask what was happening. They informed him that after receiving a call, the boy had suddenly dashed off in the direction of his school. Pedaling as fast as he could, he reached an incredible speed, even losing his cap along the way. While pedaling, many thoughts raced through his mind. He had to make it in time before anyone did something bad to his Yuna, especially since the two hadn't spoken all day. He felt guilty and needed to get there as quickly as possible. Past memories were surfacing in his mind. While pedaling, he recalled a time when he had a very different look. However, his mustache was always something that defined his personality. He remembered being at work at the door of a club when he saw a man holding a girl. The boy intervened, asking the man to let her go, but the man, being rude, insisted on grabbing her arm. Another young man approached and told the man that he was being disrespectful and that his father wouldn't be pleased to know how he was handling things. The man quickly greeted the young man and apologized, saying he wouldn't do it again. The girl briefly glanced at the boy, who was also looking at her. That was the first time he noticed Yuna and the first time she saw him. On the first day at Sunny's school, the same boy was still on crutches, seeming to have a broken leg. People whispered about him, saying he must come from a high-ranking family or know someone important. While he was standing and checking his phone, Yuna appeared and asked if he was the mustached guy from the club. That's when they realized they would be in the same class. She asked him how he had the nerve to come to school like that, and told him to stop dyeing his hair and start dressing properly. He asked her who she thought she was to tell him how to act. Annoyed, she kept staring at him. He stood up and asked her to give him a moment. In secret, he asked her not to tell anyone, either the students nor the teacher, about what had happened the previous day. He said it was about the mustache and working at the club and that it had to remain a secret. He asked why she would waste her time saying such things about someone. Glaring at him, she said that if he was so scared, he should start acting like a normal student and stop being a thug. He told her to stop bothering him with that useless nonsense. He thought she had serious attitude problems. He also saw Mia and Yuna reunite after studying together in elementary school. The two chatted in front of him as if he didn't exist. He thought he should have pretended not to have seen her before. Why did he have to attend the same school as her? There was only a year left until college entrance exams, and they could party like crazy. At least that's what some guys heading toward him were saying. However, when they passed by him, they gave him dirty looks and said something nasty about him. He pretended not to hear them, but then they called him back, asking if he was a freshman and how he dared to look at his seniors like that. Dom Kong immediately said he was just looking ahead and couldn't help it if they were there. Being seniors, they weren't going to let a guy with such a hideous appearance confront them. One of them warned that he'd better stop acting like a smart aleck. Dom Kong didn't falter for a second and kept staring at the guy. The guy tried to lunge at him, attempting to land a hook, but Dom simply dodged. However, since he was injured, one of them kicked his crutch, causing him to fall to the ground. They then started kicking him, asking who he thought he was. They left, saying kids these days didn't know how to be respectful and warning him not to mess with them again if he wanted to stay intact. Dom was caught off guard at first, but now it was different. He picked up his crutch from the ground. As the two were still bad-mouthing him, talking about putting all the freshmen in their place, he appeared behind them. When one of them turned around, it was already too late. The crutch was already near his face. And that's how Dom Kong became an excellent disciplinarian that day. He knocked the two of them down. Mia and her friend happened to be passing by. They were chatting and walking when, further ahead, they saw Dom Kong properly educating the boys. The two troublemakers had already been thoroughly disciplined. Yuna, upon seeing the guy with the crutch managing to handle the two on his own, was astonished. Dom Kong was still there, standing near the two who had tried to hurt him, even though he was on crutches with a broken foot. In the principal's office, Dom was receiving a major lecture because it was against the rules for a first-year student to fight with a third-year student. The principal then asked the teachers to return to their classrooms and not stand around chatting but to keep an eye on the students instead. He also instructed them to ensure no one found out about the incident, as he didn't want the school's reputation to be tarnished. The vice principal was upset because this had to happen while the principal was away on an overseas business trip. He told the student that his parents were on their way to the school. There was a knock at the door. The secretary came in, notifying that Dom Kang's father had arrived. The vice principal asked her to let them in, and told her to allow everyone to enter. The secretary, trembling, tried to explain something, but before she could finish, they entered. Dom King's father and all his bodyguards walked in, commenting on how pleased they were that the boy was attending such a fine school. Taking off his glasses and appearing even more intimidating, the father asked his son what he had done this time. When the man greeted the vice principal, the latter practically shrank to the point of nearly disappearing. Dom knew he was in big trouble. He realized this was about to escalate even further. Later, when he walked out and scathed through the hallways, people were left wondering how he hadn't been expelled. After disciplining 2 people with his crutches, everyone started avoiding him, and some even began to gossip about him behind his back. He was frustrated that everyone kept talking about him as if he didn't exist. He found the perfect spot to take a nap, a high and quiet place. Lying down on the floor, exhausted, he started to doze off. He was startled awake when someone told him to get up. Terrified, he realized that the person calling him had even given him a kick to speed up the waking process. Annoyed, he asked who the miserable person was that did that to him. Then he realized it was just the annoying girl who always nagged him. She looked at him and asked if he had any idea how much time she had wasted searching for him all over the school. Immediately, Dom asked why she had been looking so hard for him. She told him the teacher had sent her to find him because she wanted to speak with him. Lying back down, he said he'd go later, but for now, he wanted to relax a bit more because dealing with teachers gave him a headache. Opening one eye to see if she had left, he noticed she was still sitting beside him, fiddling with her phone. She glanced at him and remarked that she felt sorry for him. How could a student dye his hair, work at a club, and still have time to discipline older students? Why didn't he try being a decent student for once? Dom Khan wanted to know why she cared so much and kept bothering him. Now she was even testing his patience. The 2 of them stayed on the rooftop for quite some time. She asked him what he planned to do after graduation. There were a few things he could consider. He only wanted to know why she was asking him that kind of question, especially there of all places. She commented that everyone had things they wanted to do and asked because he must have something in mind too. He then said he liked music. She asked if he meant writing music, composing melodies, or being a singer. He clarified that he didn't know exactly what he wanted to do with music. He just knew he wanted to work in that field. She thought his answer was too vague, considering there were many paths he could take. Dom explained that he felt calm whenever he listened to music, whether at the club or at home. That's when he concluded that he wanted to create good music too. Yuna told him that if he studied music, he could get into a university and earn a good degree. Dom Khan wanted to know if it was really necessary to attend university to study music. She said she didn't think there was any law making it mandatory. However, university was where people went to become specialists in something they wanted to pursue. He listened to her as he lit a cigarette. She, however, told him absolutely not. He pulled the tobacco from his mouth and told him that, whatever he did, he should at least not use tobacco at school. Especially there, he told him that if he didn't even have a high school diploma, society wouldn't value him. He tried to change the subject and asked what she would like to do. She said she didn't know yet. That's when he found her response hard to understand. The girl explained that she studied a lot whenever she could because she wanted to work hard for her younger brother. She didn't really have a long-term goal. Then he asked about her brother, and she fell silent. It seemed like something she didn't like to talk about. She then said she was wasting her time there, stood up, and told him to start behaving better and go see the teacher. The boy defended himself, saying that the time she wasted was because she kept striking up a conversation. The girl thought it was nice that he had something he wanted to do. She hoped his dreams would come true and said he would have her full support. Once again, she reminded him to go see the teacher. From that day on, he began to see her differently, especially when she said she supported him. He thought that no one in his life had ever wanted to support him before. That's when he felt something in his chest as big as his desire to change. It was almost like a purpose. The next day at school, everyone was shocked by what was happening. They noticed he had dyed his hair a different color. The boy had changed. He dyed his hair black, and instead of making a mess, he was now trying to help clean up. He noticed someone wasting an eraser just to leave bits on the floor. He told the boy to stop because he was trying to keep the floor clean. Seeing that the boy was ignoring him, he peeked at the drawing and the bits of eraser he was leaving on the floor. He told the boy that if those eraser bits ended up on the floor, he would pick them all up himself. This left the boy uneasy. Afterward, he explained that it made cleaning harder. He handed him a correction pen that didn't make as much of a mess as the eraser. The boy, startled, said he would use it. Arriving at the classroom, he noticed the girl from the day before cleaning the window panes, and he saw that she had a lot of willingness to help. That's when he approached her. Taking her hand, which held the cloth she was using to clean the window, he told her to let a man handle that job. She looked at him and asked why he was acting so strange. His behavior was frustrating the teachers and administrators even more. They told him to come down because it was dangerous. The students also noticed that the boy's actions were becoming more eccentric by the day. He had climbed outside, with his injured leg, to clean the window, saving the girl the effort. However, the boy wasn't even listening to what they were saying. He just wanted to keep cleaning and impress Yuna. The girl was scared and realized that everything was her fault. After class, the two were walking home together. She told him she had never seen anyone as extreme as him. The boy said he was exhausted from working so hard at school. She told him he could live a normal life, act normally, and didn't need to go to such extremes. That's when his stomach growled. She asked if he wanted something to eat because she would buy him something as a reward for all his hard work. What he heard was her asking if he wanted to have dinner with her at her expense. He thought it must be an invitation for a date. While he stood there daydreaming, she was already ahead, asking if he wasn't going to follow her. He apologized for always being lost in thought, and asked her what they were going to eat. As a guy bumped into him roughly, even though the guy was the one who bumped him, he apologized. Still, the guy wasn't satisfied. He asked what he was going to do about his uniform. Those guys were just TJ's lackeys. Dom Kong asked why that would be his problem. Yuna whispered to him not to dare try to teach anyone a lesson, or she would never speak to him again. She took charge of the situation, and told the boy they would pay for dry cleaning. The boy said that wasn't enough. He'd need a new uniform, which would cost 300,000 won. Yuna told him to give her his account number, and she would send the money immediately. That's when Dom told her to wait, suggesting that instead of money, they could take his pair of limited edition shoes instead. He mentioned how difficult it had been to negotiate that pair of sneakers with the rapper. He explained they were a Super Air Jordan V1 series pair, supposedly worn by MJ himself, and they were in men's size. He added that Dom would definitely prefer these over money. One of the guys asked if they were fake, but upon closer inspection, the placement of the pores, the stitching on the back, and the quality of the logo made them look authentic. Yuna couldn't understand what was so special about a pair of shoes. She truly didn't get boys. The guys found it intriguing and were satisfied. The sneakers were very stylish and would fetch good money if sold online. They tried to use the sneakers as payment to apologize for touching her. Yuna was pleased with him, as he resolved everything peacefully. That's when he told her he planned to graduate high school without causing more trouble. He said he now had more reasons to leave the clan. She responded that it was good and that she'd buy him anything he wanted to eat. He said he wanted to eat chicken but then grabbed his phone and messaged his bodyguards, informing them about what had happened. Upon hearing this, they quickly dealt with the boy carrying Dom Kang's sneakers. The guys were walking away, joking that they should mess with more losers to get things like they did that day. However, around the corner stood Dom Kang's bodyguards. Just seeing them made the boys freeze in fear. The bodyguards demanded the sneakers back, warning that nothing bad would happen if they complied. After the boys handed over the sneakers, some commotion and noise ensued. After a while, they were found tied to a tree by their heads, crying, probably from sheer emotion. Dom Kang, pedaling away, thought he had broken the promise he made to her a long time ago. He pedaled as fast as he could to catch up to people, passing Minu and Jay along the way. However, he didn't even notice them as he was in too much of a hurry to handle the situation. Minu, noticing him, found it odd and wondered where he was going with such urgency. Dom Kang arrived at his destination in style, performing a trick he had practiced extensively. He got there with a mix of exhaustion from pedaling and anger over what was happening to the girls. From a distance, he couldn't understand why so many people were cornering them. Yuna quickly noticed his arrival. She had been expecting it, knowing that as soon as Mia called, he'd definitely show up. Everyone there turned to look at him, some asking each other if it was really that guy. Vinny recognized him from the cafe incident, and said he'd been waiting to see him again since then. Dom Kang, showing no hesitation, asked what they were doing to the girls. The guy he had educated the day before said they were waiting for him to arrive. They asked if he was ignoring them when they spoke, as they felt they weren't being properly acknowledged. The guy from the previous incident told Dom that all he wanted was his 2 front teeth. Dom, however, crouched down to pick up a lighter, gripping it tightly in his hand. The guy assumed he was bowing to him at that moment, completely misreading the situation. But quickly, Dom Kang realized he needed to discipline him again, and so he did. This time, he threw him to the ground, leaving him there to reflect on his repetitive actions. Now, the guy was properly educated and would likely have no further issues with him. After dealing with him, Dom told the rest of them not to even think about running away like scared little girls. No one could figure out what he meant by those words. They thought they could teach him a lesson for good this time. Yuna stepped in front of him and pleaded with him to stop and not start chaos, insisting it was they who had provoked him. Dom Kang, placing a hand on her head, told her the situation wasn't easy to resolve. He asked her to stay with Mia behind him. One of his opponents warned him to stop trying to act cool in front of his girlfriend, as it might bring consequences. However, Dom told him to shut up and, if he wanted to make a move, to do it quickly. With that, he took the initiative himself, and the fight began. Dom was consumed by anger, finding it difficult to maintain control. The impulse to discipline them all was overwhelming, and he was perfectly handling the situation, still clutching the lighter in his hand while landing punches on several of them as they tried to attack him. That's when one of them suggested holding Dom Kang down to make it easier to hit him. Another proposed that they all attack him at once, thinking it would be more efficient. Yuna, watching the scene, didn't know what to do. She was terrified. Mia suggested she consider calling the police. Yuna lowered her head and said they couldn't call the police. Mia didn't understand her friend's hesitation, as the whole situation could quickly spiral out of control. Her friend explained that if they called the police, Dom would also be punished. And if the school found out he had another incident like this, with that option ruled out, Mia asked her friend what they could do. At that moment, a jacket from the same school as hers was thrown over her face, and a backpack was tossed to the ground. That's when she realized it was her brother coming to their aid. Minu arrived angry, saying he had followed Dom because he knew he had gotten into trouble again and was alone. However, so far, Dom seemed to be handling himself. But if Minu had taken a little longer, the situation could have gotten serious because their plan was to corner Dom. When Dom turned around, he saw it was Minu there to help him. Minu shouted, asking why Dom was surrounded by that bunch of losers. The group wanted to know who Minu was to be getting involved in someone else's mess. As he was speaking, someone lunged at Minu, punching him in the face. Someone in the back also said it had been a long time since they'd seen him. When Minu looked, he realized it was Vinny, who said he never imagined Minu would be friends with a loser like that. Vinny asked how his leg was and started laughing at him. Minu thought Vinny had settled down a long time ago, but it seemed he hadn't changed at all. Dom Kong continued confronting everyone who crossed his path. Dom Kong announced that he would personally take care of the red-haired guy. The words he chose were a mistake because Vinny hated being identified solely by the color of his eyes or hair. Yuna noticed Jay's presence, and was surprised he was there too. She asked him how he had found out about everything. Jay simply explained that he had seen Dom speeding past them on his bike, so they decided to follow. At first, Jay just observed the chaos unfolding in front of him. He noticed that Dom Kong was trying to deal with his problems with those guys. Minu wasn't standing idly by either, and was also putting an end to those thugs. Seeing this, Jay realized he couldn't just stand there. He took his backpack off his shoulders and threw it to the ground. He prepared to take off his jacket, and asked the girls to keep an eye on their bikes.